Our story began on a beautiful sunny day in the valley. The animals were at peace, enjoying the morning, until someone arrived interrupting the tranquility. Oh, a little boy was running through the field. Who could he be? He was Han Shim, son of Yun Shim and Yunni Min. Right behind him, someone came along. It was Jade Shim, our protagonist, daughter of the same father, but with another woman. Oh no! Han tripped and stumbled. Jade asked if he was afraid of a silly little bug, but the little boy said he surrendered. She showed a mischievous smile and finally showed him the surprise. Han opened his eyes, still very afraid, but they were just little leaves. What a mischievous girl. Some elderly women nearby thought Jade was a very insolent girl. To them, it was unacceptable the way she played with the young master, since she was just the daughter of a merchant from a lesser house. Someone asked if they were siblings. If they were siblings, why did she dress in rags? After all, coming from a good family, it seemed like she had never eaten well in her life. Considering she was her father's daughter, she should feel grateful that he hadn't abandoned her on the street. Considering that Lady Min didn't care about the girl, the woman constantly flaunted her wealth by making donations to the temple. She was truly very arrogant. 50 years ago, Lan Chunmin started a trading house on land chosen by a feng shui expert. With that, he found success overnight. But unfortunately, his wife wasn't blessed with the same luck, and she passed away. So he found himself alone with his only daughter. After he passed away, his brother-in-law took over the business. But it was only the daughter, Yun Ni, who inherited all of her father's properties. Her husband, Yun Shim, reformulated the business model to benefit it, and with his newly acquired status, he entered the refined world of the art trade. Prince Han Young, well-versed in art and calligraphy, became an investor. This resulted in great success for the business. All the greatest merchants from every corner of the country frequented the Min House, and soon there were already more than 100 employees working there. Yun Ni bought 3 mansions connected by gates, and soon a commercial complex was being born. It was as if it were a great palace. At Jade's residence, the little girl was hurt. What happened? She was crying in sadness over her injured legs. Yun Ni, lady of the trading house, was calling the little girl terrible names. Han tried to tell his mother that it was he who insisted they stay out late, but she told her son to be quiet. Then she noticed a wound on him. That was enough to make the woman even more furious. The mother asked why the girl only caused problems. She had told Jade to take care of her son. He had barely recovered. The girl argued that she was already healed. The fight escalated drastically, and the woman asked if the girl needed more punishment. The furious mother ordered the girl to go back to her shack and not leave for 3 days, or she would suffer the consequences. Beside her, her little dog tried to cheer her up. Jade hugged the animal and asked him not to worry about her. The girl was determined not to suffer because of that. Soon after, she grabbed the roof tiles. Jade looked around to see if no one was watching. She found her telescope, and during sunset, she decided to spy on something. Far from there, at Han's residence, the boy's mother watched him while he slept. She seemed to love him very much. While he slept peacefully, the woman placed an amulet beside him. Some time ago, a shaman revealed that he was a fragile boy, and for his protection, it was good that he always had that amulet with him. That was the only way to keep him safe. The mother remembered the old woman's words, a secret kept under lock and key. It was a foolproof method. It was a talisman made from tiger claws. She was certain it would ward off all bad luck, but its only flaw was that it looked too much like a feminine accessory. The mother would do everything to convince him in the future, so that when her son became an adult, he would always carry the amulet. The woman wished her son sweet dreams and that the talisman would protect him. And so she left. But Han wasn't really sleeping. Ha! Outside, he walked hidden through the night. The door opened with a creak, and a familiar voice woke Jade up. Han asked the girl if he could sleep there with her. The little boy had brought her a snack. How adorable. He asked why she hadn't had dinner. Jade replied that she wanted her mother to feel guilty. She offered him a piece, but Han didn't want to get his fingers dirty, so she put a piece in his mouth. Jade revealed that this wasn't the first time she'd been confined, but she was sad about not being able to see the swallows that would soon be born on the roof. Han promised he would tell her everything. She also said the mountain camellias would soon bloom. The little boy said he would pick some for her, but Jade refused. The protagonist asked how he would get to the mountain to get flowers for her. Han said it was a promise, and said he had something for her, and he handed the tiger claw amulet to Jade. She knew that had been a gift from the great shaman. Jade asked if he was sure. She didn't even know if she should hold on to it. Han said yes, and that he would bring her several camellias. He also promised to bring her some hazelnuts, so she could teach him to shoot them from his slingshot. And then, a huge lightning bolt struck outside. That left Han terrified. He jumped into the girl's arms. Poor thing, he just wanted comfort. She touched his trembling shoulders. Jade hugged him, telling him everything would be okay. The protagonist began to recite a poem about snow falling on a rocky mountain path, and she said that next time he should stay safe at home. What she didn't know was that accepting the tiger claw amulet would change her life forever. Despite it being a beautiful day, there seemed to be an argument going on. One person pointed at the administrative building, while others asked if construction hadn't already ended. Master Shim had redesigned the entire building because he wanted a different shape. Even the ceiling was very high, and the workers had to stretch their necks to look at it. To them, the work seemed like it would never end. And wasn't that just like life at the palace? The master was just a merchant, but he spent much of his time pretending to be a lord. Then someone confronted the man. The man told the peasants to get back to work, since his master was above the emperor. He was the lord of money. The worker said that anyone could marry a rich woman and live off her fortune. The other asked if he was being challenged. Ugh, men. Then a third man arrived, ordering them to stop that fight, since they needed to finish construction before the deadline. He shouted that if they wanted to be paid, they needed to finish all the pending work and get back to it right away. Moments later, a lady named Yubum, Jade's grandmother, arrived with snacks for them to eat in the afternoon. She had also brought a bit of rice wine. While they ate, she noticed something strange. The young Master Han slipped out through the front gate. Oh no, where was he going? The workers noticed that the lady was having a busy day. With many tasks, she barely had time to rest. The beautiful blue sky soon turned orange with the end of the day. A man was pulling a small cart. A little girl approached. She positioned the shoes for Uni to step down. The girl was Bumia, Uni's maid. She said the days would soon get longer and it would get warmer. The two were in the palace courtyard. She thought everything was a mess. Lady Uni ordered the woman to call her mother. Lady Uni said the place was a pigsty and ordered the servants to clean everything before her husband returned. Then she asked where her son was. Men lit many torches. Everyone called out for the boy. Even his father had joined the search. Throughout the palace, people called for the little master, Han. One of the servants said the sun had already set long ago, and despite having searched everywhere, Yan Shim shouted at the man, asking how his son could have simply vanished from the palace. The master ordered everyone to go back to searching for his son. Yan Yu was devastated. Where could her beloved son be? She squinted to see better. In the distance, she saw Jade. The little girl had a stubborn look on her face. She raised a hand in the air, and with great force struck the little girl. What cruelty! How could she be so evil? The woman asked how she could have stayed hidden all that time without searching for Han, but the protagonist, as brave as she was, reminded the woman that she herself had forbidden the girl from leaving the house. Yanyi was furious at that brat's audacity. Wait a moment. What was that on Jade's clothes? The woman grabbed the amulet and asked what she was doing with that jewel. She screamed at the girl, asking how she dared to take her son's amulet, even though Jade said it had been a gift from the boy. The mother refused to believe it. And then came the revelation. Jade said Han had gone to the Namsam Mountains. Uni Min imagined the worst-case scenario. How could the little girl have made him go to that place? The crazed woman said the girl had brought chaos to that family. Even Yeon told her to stay calm since he had sent men to search for their son around the city. She asked why her husband protected that terrible little girl. She had warned him many times that Jade was synonymous with destruction. Our protagonist heard terrible things about herself, like that she had caused trouble for her mother when she was born. Yeon went on saying that now the little girl would ruin her family. Finally, the crazed woman managed to break free from her husband. With a dark expression, she said even the cruelest fate would be too little for Jade, and asked how the little girl dared to steal the tiger claw amulet. Yeon was consumed by rage. The cruel woman continued punishing the little girl. Oh no, such cruelty, she was convinced that Jade was the one who should be in the mountains. The little girl was suffering so much, she just wanted that moment to end. A beautiful painting of Han had been made. This was placed in a memorial at the temple. Instruments and melodies played. They asked if they had found the shaman, but she was hard to locate since she tended to go wherever the winds took her. Now Yeonwi turned to the only shaman in the city, and so she consulted other wise men, but they were always sad to inform her. According to the spirits, her son had been lost for a long time. She threw a piece of glass that shattered into several pieces. Yeonwin ordered the woman not to say the same things as the previous ones. The woman with her wounded cheek remained silent for a moment. The mother was still very frustrated. The woman suggested a ritual to pray for little Han's safe return. That way, everyone would be present to help. No one believed that was just a simple portrait. It was such a beautiful image that it seemed like the little master would step out of it at any moment. People said the boy's brocade robe was painted with the colors of imperial azaleas and jade beads on his wrist. That would certainly attract the attention of thieves. A man said money would never be a problem for Yeonshim. If the criminals demanded ransom, he would certainly pay it. That portrait was displayed on every corner of the city. If anyone looked like little Han, he certainly would have already been turned in. Other people commented on Yeon's return from the temple and found out he had hired a government official. Apparently, the two together searched for missing children but found nothing. If Han was still in the city, he would have already been returned or located. No one understood how that was possible. They combed every corner of the city, and the government officials assisted in the searches. How could Han have disappeared without leaving a single trace? The bells of the musical instrument rang. The new shaman begged the spirits for guidance. She called upon everyone's ancestral spirits. The woman performed a ritual with wide swords. She danced gracefully. It was as if she were summoning the spirits with her wisdom. Her feet danced in harmony with the ritual. The shaman bowed, listening to the sounds of the mountains. She leapt and raised her arm to the sky. A loud drum accompanied her steps. Everyone seemed very impressed by her abilities. Everyone gulped. The shaman demanded that everyone be silent. She stood facing the drawing, and everyone fell silent. The woman raised her hand. Oh no, what was she doing? Tears streamed down her face. Cries of shock filled the room. She knocked over her ritual instruments. It was as if the truth stood before her eyes. And then the woman met a cruel fate and was struck by the consequences of the ritual. Everyone watched the shaman in silence. Sometime later, a hammer struck the wood with force. Everyone heard the noise with embarrassed expressions. Yun Shim said that from then on, only authorized people would be allowed to enter the palace complex. The population agreed out of respect. Some even asked if there was any need to go that far. Another man said he was certainly trying to get his wife's attention to anger her. Some asked if the rumors were true. They didn't know if young Jade Shim was possessed by an evil spirit. Others said she had confessed her crimes, even admitting she had sent Han to the mountains to pick flowers for her. One misstep could have cost the boy his life. Jade was very distressed. Her only friend now was her little dog. A man told them to open their eyes since Lady Yunni had always wanted to destroy the little girl. They should be ashamed for believing those lies. A worker recalled a time when Lady Yunni wanted to convince everyone that Jade was possessed by an evil spirit and hired actors to hurt the girl. They spent 3 days and 3 nights tormenting the poor girl. Maybe the real monster wasn't her. People remained silent for a while. The man lamented that now Jade might remain confined forever. There was no way that heartless woman would let her out. They remembered that Dakai would soon arrive. If there was one person who could locate the little Master Han, it was him. The temple monk said there was an evil spirit lurking around Jade. Yuoni told the little girl that it was no surprise that a monster that fed on disappointment would surround someone as terrible as her. Such cruelty. The woman said terrible things to the girl. How could someone be so cruel? Jade was deeply tormented. At night, our protagonist was alone in her room. She was very afraid. Jade recited the same poem she had sung to Han. Despite the beautiful poetry, the fear didn't seem to go away. It was as if the room were distorting. Macabre images of monsters from beyond materialized before her. She screamed in fear. It was truly terrifying. The creature writhed, creating more and more terror. Jade just wanted to escape that horrible monster. Our protagonist's hands were trembling badly, and because of that, she ended up dropping the bowl. Suddenly, her grandmother entered her chambers. Yubum approached her granddaughter, trying to calm her down. The lady lit a candle. She touched her granddaughter's face, asking if she recognized her. Everything would be fine now. Jade closed her eyes in relief. The grandmother became very emotional, seeing her granddaughter in that state. She had her granddaughter drink pure water to cleanse her pain, fear, and anguish. The lady told her that her granddaughter could ring those bells and she would come immediately to help her. Then she thought it would be a good idea to spend the night with her granddaughter to calm her down. But Jade refused, seeming quite tired. The grandmother said goodbye to her granddaughter, telling her not to worry about anything. And then Jade was left alone in the room. She went to the candle, which barely lit the room. There was the tiger claw amulet. Jade wanted to keep it safe until Han returned. It was her promise. She remembered the little boy promising he would bring her many camellias. But instead, that promise only brought sorrow to the family. Our protagonist cried in the dark. Poor thing. Jade thought there was nothing more to be done, until the light intensified. She remembered a legend that if she made a wish while burning her own hand, it would come true. Now she was determined. She brought her palm close to the flame. The girl couldn't hold back her tears. Our protagonist sobbed while trembling badly. All she wanted most was for him to be alive and safe. Besides, it would be amazing if he came back. Ah, a new day at the palace. Dakai had just arrived. He was announced as the greatest bounty hunter in the country. The meeting would be highly confidential. And so, Dakai was there waiting for Yan Shim. The hunter greeted Lord Shim. The noble threw a bag of coins in front of him. Dakai asked what that was. Yan was acting as if he were a beggar. He asked that Yan accept his respect. The hunter didn't care about silver or gold. That could be discussed later. And then he bowed to the Lord. Dakai explained that the situation was very different from capturing an adult fugitive. In those cases, clients didn't care how long it took. He asked that the Lord understand this was an unusual situation. The hunter said if a lunatic wanted to harm the child, it would be very easy, but Yan hated hearing that. He grabbed the paper forcefully and threw it beside Dokai. The man confessed that despite his tough appearance, he was quite sensitive. He said he was heartbroken over little Han's disappearance and would dedicate himself fully to finding him. However, as Jan must know, nobles showered him with wealth and rice to find their runaway mistresses and daughters. He had already accepted those jobs before, and dropping them could cost him his head. Literally, Jan didn't like that at all. What was the hunter trying to say? Dokai asked if the Lord would brand him a villain. He didn't want to be on bad terms with Jan. The hunter said the noble could pay him whatever he wished and his work would reflect the compensation. If he were given full authority, he would be ready to go through anything to bring Han back. Yan Shim grew angrier and angrier. That guy just wanted money. He stamped the paper hard and told the hunter he had accepted his price. For that very reason, Dokai couldn't fail to find the child. The hunter bowed courteously to the Lord and asked if he was aware of his terms. Dokai reminded him that if he brought the child back alive, Lord Yan should pay 3 times the agreed amount and double that if he only recovered the body. Yan fell silent after hearing that. In the dead of night, someone was running desperately. He was out of breath from the escape. The little boy dashed through the bamboo, but his legs were already very tired. Oh no, he tripped. He tried to get up, but was still struggling. When he started running again, his shoe fell off. Already among the trees, he didn't even notice what was left behind. Far from there at the palace, someone said they already had too much to deal with. The man explained that Prince Hampyong didn't trust any of the servants when it came to art, and asked for forgiveness. Hyun asked what the steward had been doing all that time. He ordered him to properly preserve that artwork. He opened the doors and said he would visit the prince at his estate. Then he told them to make the necessary preparations, and so everyone headed for the Unwon Mountains. Yan and his steward finally arrived at the prince's estate, and he introduced himself. The doors slowly opened. Yan was curious about what he saw before him. Here and there, butterflies fluttered about. So the rumors were all true. Prince Hampyong sent his servants to the fields to catch rare insects in spring. He truly was a peculiar man. The noble didn't even notice when a butterfly landed on his shoulder. His artist's hands were too focused on his brushes. His butterfly friends were very graceful. Prince Hampyong was the king's only son, and an art fanatic like no other. Even enemy kingdoms paused their wars to admire his artworks. The admiration everyone had for the young man's artistic eye was unanimous. Young noticed he seemed too absorbed even to receive his guests. That extraordinary focus had sparked rumors about an orchid painting. Long ago, it had already been 7 years. The Min Trading House was a success thanks to him. If Young thought about the connections and the wealthy sponsors who came along with the prince, no artwork was too valuable for him. Young's steward opened a box containing several paints. Oh, a gift? Hampyong looked at it with curiosity. Those were rare pigments brought from a distant, icy kingdom. That should be enough to negotiate. But he remained silent. Then he lamented Yun's loss, since his heart must be aching deeply over his precious son Han. The father was deeply moved by the prince's concern. He replied that he had been very involved with his artworks thanks to Yun's contributions. Then the prince declared that he had noticed a very interesting artwork, sent by his friend. Yun grew a bit tense. He asked forgiveness for the way the matter had been handled before, and assured him that next time he would preserve the artwork better. That way, no further adjustment would be necessary later. The two said goodbye to the prince. Yan felt relieved and called for his steward Gong. He bowed in respect to his master. Oh no! Yan slapped him across the face. The man asked how they could have gone to the prince carrying artwork in such poor condition. Was Gong really that careless? The steward asked for forgiveness. Then Yan dismissed him. The man remained silent for a few moments. Then he noticed something in the forest. The wind passed through the bamboo, making a soft sound. What would those winds bring him? Dake still hadn't sent any letter about his progress, and the year was already coming to an end. Snow fell silently. That was the Moksagol Valley. Brr, it was very cold. Someone sneezed. Yon and Steward Gong had gone to pay another visit. Behind them, a mysterious little boy. Who could he be? He was quite different from Han and Jade. There sat a box with a large gold reward, as promised. Yon declared to the man that this child would be the future heir of the Shim family, and that they should never see each other again. He seemed very distressed. His only request was that the boy be well fed and cared for. The man said it was time for Yon to leave, or else they would get stuck in the valley because of the snow. The boy left together with Yon. He was advised to leave the past behind. That was his final request, and so they left. The boy took on a determined expression. What would come next? At the administrative house, the elegant decorations were all ready. Yon asked what he was waiting for. He could come in already. The boy greeted him. He seemed impressed. Yun didn't understand where that feeling came from. He turned and saw the sword. The boy probably knew it was very valuable. The man explained it was the Sineon sword. The weapon had been forged in the first hours of the first month of the year of the tiger. It was a beautiful blade with the constellations of the sky on it. The boy revealed he had only read about it in books. Yun said it was a lucky sword, containing the energy of 4 tigers. He said he could never dare to want an item like that. Yun asked why not. The man said the boy should indeed covet it. The blade was shiny and the engravings were made in gold. The young man was impressed by the elegance of the sword. Yun fell silent, thinking how desperate a noble must be to give up his own son. The boy was the family's only male heir. He knew the family lineage would remain noble. It barely mattered that the boy had been raised without luxuries. The man noticed the boy had a shrewd look, recognizing such a precious family heirloom. Yun was pleased with his strategy. He explained to the boy that great wealth always attracted undesirable people who wanted to sabotage him at every turn. Then he asked what the boy would do if he wanted to become a good merchant. The boy replied that he would have goals, that if he helped the poor, his reputation would improve and he would have fewer undesirable people around. Yun replied that he should remember one thing, that it was only worth forging relationships that brought financial gain. Otherwise, they should be cut off without a second thought. Money was something crafty and cunning, only kept through resentment and strong alliances. If he forgot about his family, there would come a day when that sword would be his. Yun asked if he was being clear. The boy said yes. Currently, the Shim family's business was divided between selling art and other products, and he, the master, only handled the sale of paintings, calligraphy, and ceramics. The other products still fell under the supervision of the Min family, with final approval belonging to his wife. Yun planned to expand his influence, and in the future, his son would take his place. He asked a man named Min to come closer. His new father introduced him to his new companion, a man highly experienced in the family business who would assist him. Well, he really had a friendly smile. Yun revealed there was one more person he'd like to introduce. And then Jade entered, accompanied by Yubum. She looked at the young man with some interest. He also didn't seem to recognize her at all. Yun said that from then on they would be siblings. The father explained that she was 2 years younger than him, so he would be the older brother. However, outside, shouting was happening in the house. Yun Min threw open the doors. The boy stood up, startled, to greet her. Yun said he had planned to introduce them formally, but their arrival had taken too long. So this was the boy's new mother. However, Lady Min was furious. She refused to be mother to anyone but Han. Her gaze was piercing and frightening. The woman said the boy looked like a mere peasant. Yun got angry at his wife and said that was enough. Yun said her father had given his life to the family business, and she wouldn't allow someone of such low status to take part in the trade. Her husband ordered her to stop saying those things, but she denounced him, saying that every time he went to see the prince, boxes of gold vanished from the safe. Wow, that's serious. She then revealed that she was aware of all the bribes he offered others. Yun sadly remembered her missing son, but Yun had had enough and grabbed the woman, ordering her to stop saying those things. She couldn't hold back and said that the butcher's son was better than a bastard. The man said everything was already done and there was nothing more she could do. But Yun delivered the final blow. Since he had gone against her wishes and adopted the boy, she took the privilege of officially naming him, and she threw a piece of paper in front of the boy, declaring that this was now his name, and that's what he would be called. The boy was left speechless upon hearing her say the most terrible things in the world. Yun ordered him to keep his head down, while her husband tried to push her outside. She asked if he believed Cheomin was his servant, since he worked for her and would watch the boy's every move. The door closed and the boy was left speechless. Then Jade broke the silence, saying that sometimes it helps to hum to yourself when Lady Min is like that. The protagonist was very used to it, and didn't seem surprised at all. He bent down to pick up the paper while she poured tea. The boy felt very sad at what he saw. His name, Muduan, was the combination of the words nothing and end. Jade introduced herself to him. Despite the precious stone, her name meant nothing in that family. Despite the harshness of the words, that comforted Muduan. 10 years later, when thin layers of snow covered the branches, and the first flowers began to bloom, the year of the rooster arrived. A faint light illuminated the walls of a cave, the light of an already melted candle. Several people were sitting together. Was it some kind of ritual? People prayed with their hands together. Now grown, Jiyu was also among them. What was our protagonist doing? Judging by the symbolism, she was apparently at a Christian mass. What could have led her there? Far from there, Cheomin told his master they were already arriving home. Now a grown man, Mujin was already beginning to see his home. Something startled both men. Jiud was being carried by force by Lady Min's men. Cheomin said Yoni was certainly responsible for that. The older brother asked what she was doing at a Catholic mass, and wanted to know if she wasn't afraid. Jade asked what she should do. She replied that no matter how much she prayed to Buddha, she couldn't free herself from that house. Mujin asked if she hadn't noticed that Yoni always kept someone watching her. He noticed the marks on her wrists and asked if she had also stopped drinking. He didn't like remembering the times he had found her drunk around the estate. If Lady Min found out about that, the consequences would be terrible. Mujin didn't want to bother her by bringing up the troubles. The boy looked at her more closely and noticed other details. Jade seemed to have no more life in her, and because of her confinement, her skin had become pale and cold. It was as if she had turned into a shadowy spirit. Mujin deeply wished she would show her emotions, instead of trying to hide them. Then Jade caught his attention and asked him to look at something. The protagonist asked if she could get good money selling that hair accessory. He noticed it was the ruby he had gotten for her days before. Jade explained that a ruby of that size would be worth little, so she turned it into a hair accessory. She revealed her plan was to use that money to buy Japanese coins which were becoming rarer, indicating the price would soon rise. What a clever girl. Mujin asked where that obsession with money and foreign coins had come from. He begged her to stop auctioning off her personal items, since he couldn't always cover for her. Jade said she was close to reaching her goal. The young man said that made no sense at all. But Jade was furious since she didn't want to spend the rest of her life making sweets in the palace. She stood up, saying she would go to Yanjing and find her brother. Mujin asked how many times he'd need to repeat that this had nothing to do with her. Their parents had already grown tired of it, and he had also hired a detective. Most bounty hunters were just con artists. They said the reason they hadn't found Han was because maybe he had already disappeared long ago, or had been taken to China. But Jade wouldn't accept that a child so sought after had simply vanished. 10 years had already passed since his disappearance, and the only person who could recognize him was Jade. She needed to go to Yanjing, since it was a trading center where many people gathered to buy and sell goods, and someone might have information. Jade sat back down, asking him not to change the subject, since Mujin was the one who had promised to take her to China. The girl revealed it didn't matter if she went to China or to hell. Their parents would only be happy with Han's return and her leaving for good. Mujin asked her not to say that anymore, since it wasn't funny at all. Jade said she wasn't joking. He stayed silent, staring at his sister. Jade said the only way for her to have peace was to bring her brother back, to the place he belonged. Just as Mujin knew he was only occupying the place of someone very special who had been taken, he held her hands tightly. Mujin reminded her of the marriage proposals, but the protagonist said he wouldn't get rid of her that easily. Jade confessed she had said some pretty dark things to her fiancé, and the suitor left the palace in a hurry. Mujin said their mother wouldn't like that. Jade asked what Lady Min could do. The possible groom's family had already said they didn't want a girl like her. Mujin realized that since she was Master Yan Shim's daughter, she was already the most sought-after bride in the city. If they paid an attractive amount, Yanni wouldn't refuse any marriage proposal for Jade, even if it meant marrying her off to a monster. He revealed he had a little gift for her. Wow, it was a lovely golden knife. Jade noticed it wasn't even silver, but pure gold. She thought it was very strange. What a huge gift. He asked what was so strange about it. Jade accused him of giving gifts every time the topic of marriage came up. He seemed very embarrassed, but she gave a sincere smile. How lovely she was. Then Jade leaned in to ask a question. What could it be? Jade took too long to ask. Mujin grew more and more anxious to hide his nervous hands. He cleaned his glasses. How cute! He was blushing. And finally came the question. Jade asked if he felt sorry for her. He said yes, that he was sorry for the things she suffered. Mujin even revealed that she haunted his dreams, asking him to take her to Yanjing, or else she wanted money or alcohol. At night, she asked her brother for one more story. He explained it was already very late at night, but she thought he had simply run out of stories to tell. She said he could tell the truth. It's not like he was traveling around Joseon collecting fantastic stories. Mujin revealed that, despite his life as a traveling merchant, his greatest joy in life was collecting old and bizarre stories to tell her. He promised that next time he would tell the story of the giantess who lived in Chungcheong province. Jade grew very curious. As they said goodbye, the girl said she couldn't wait for him to become the new head merchant of the Min House, so he would always be there with her. Mujin asked if she'd like him to be her personal storyteller. The two said goodbye with waves. He heard the sound of something breaking. Around his feet, several sharp shards were scattered. Mujin didn't like that at all. After Han's disappearance, Yan placed several roof tile shards in the courtyard. The man scattered several shards in front of Jade's house. Many saw it as a loving father's gesture to protect his daughter, but Mujin knew the truth. The shards weren't to keep intruders out, but rather to keep Jade confined. The person responsible for Jade becoming a shadowy spirit, confined to her house, wasn't Lady Min's fault. It was Yan Shim's. All Mujin could do was buy rare birds and bring them to his sister, and tell stories that could distract her. Yan Shim's health had gotten much worse, and his greatest patron, Prince Hampyeong, had passed away 6 months ago. That had greatly affected the Min House business. That made Yan's health worsen even more, a result of the hardships tormenting a broken heart. Mujin knew the symptoms included chronic thirst, but he didn't know doctors were already being called. Maybe they were already considering a successor. Chalmin revealed there was a rumor that Master Shim would soon pass his entire fortune to him. However, the young man found it hard to believe Lady Min would just stand by and do nothing. Mujin judged that they must have already excluded him from the plans, or made him someone easy to control. He knew that the greater the ambition, the more patient and restrained he needed to be. For 10 years, he played the role of an innocent newcomer, going wherever he was told. Thus, he was rewarded like a dog earning meat from its master. But now, a decade later, the true leader of the Min house, Yoni Min, was weak, and the great Master Shim was so sick that he needed constant medical care. That meant Mujin no longer needed to act like a manipulable fool. There was a single reason he wanted to become master of the Min house: a missing brother and his confined sister. When he became master, he would remove all those sharp shards and give Jade a position of power. How thoughtful. He really was a sweet guy. That way she would be free to go to Yanjing, or anywhere else her heart desired. Mujin thought there was no possibility. Han was still alive, but he needed to keep acting as if he were searching for the boy, and that way he would win Jade's heart. How lovely. He could barely imagine the look she'd give when he revealed he'd give her a position of power in the Yanjing business. Mujin imagined Jade shedding tears of joy. And so, who knows, they'd end up together. Thinking about that left him blushing and happy. Mujin hoped it would become reality soon. At Yani's palace, the noblewoman was recovering. Mujin, her maid, informed her that Mujin had returned home, and told Lady Min that she should recover well, in order to return home. But Yani's appearance was dreadful. She was no longer so healthy. Mujin seemed quite worried, but said she would leave her in peace. She closed the door silently, and noticed that the lady had finished her medicine, since the doctor had asked her not to exceed that amount. All she had done for 10 years was wait for her missing son to come home. It had been a long time since she was the most beautiful woman in the empire. Mujin thought that even finding Han's body would bring her peace. The girl heard a creak at the gate. She asked the visitor who dared to arrive so early at the palace. Mujin called for Yuni. A guest had arrived, but whoever opened the door was no ordinary person. It was the city's shaman. She asked how Yuni could be lying down like that. The old woman warned that Lady Min would soon receive a very important guest. But what was she talking about? The shaman simply told her to hurry up. Yuni needed to get ready to receive him. The women were very busy with the arrival of the mysterious guest. They were hard at work making sweets for him. Then one of them called Jade to see the dessert she had made. The protagonist said that dessert wasn't quite right since it had too much syrup. Then Jade was called by someone else. They went to talk in a more private corner. The woman revealed it had been quite difficult to get that. Oh, a little notebook. Jade asked if it was the real one. The woman explained yes. The girl asked the woman not to worry about her since she wouldn't be alone. A priest from Gyeongsagol Valley had passages to reach China. That's why she had been visiting the church so often, even transcribing prayers and making generous donations, so that he would take her along on the trip. He made a promise to her. Jade hoped the man of faith wouldn't fail her. Then Yubum appeared, calling for her granddaughter. She was very alarmed. What had happened? The lady warned that the bounty hunter, Dokge, had arrived at the palace. Jade ordered everyone to calm down. She said it was certainly just another boy trying to pass himself off as Han. Uni Prum said Dokge was different this time. He had brought new information. Jade said she didn't trust the man. After all, what wouldn't he do for money? The protagonist said they would soon hear her father ban Dokge from the palaces and all other establishments. But the big reveal was that Dokge had found someone. Uni asked if he was really telling the truth. The man said the answer had been right under their noses the whole time. The noble grew furious and ordered Dokge to tell the truth once and for all. Uni couldn't stand the torment any longer. Dokge said Han had been in Pyongyang all those years. The young man didn't remember much of what happened in his childhood, but his age and the time he disappeared matched up. He also had a Hannang accent. He also had a scar on his right wrist, matching the little boy's. When Dokge asked him to write his name, he did so correctly, Han Shim, and even used his left hand like little Han. The hunter revealed to the master that he too was shocked, but congratulated the father. Uni asked if that was all. Dokge didn't understand the question. The man asked if he didn't remember all the frauds that had come before. With all those same traits, Uni stood up to leave, but Dokge had one more card up his sleeve. The hunter revealed the boy was identical to his wife, Lady Min. He said the young man had the same forehead, eyes, nose, lips, every little detail matching his mother's. Even he couldn't believe what he was seeing. Dokge said he had many years of experience, but if Uni said that young man wasn't his son, that was the final word. Uni Shim ordered that the boy be brought to him immediately. The hunter stood up and said he had a problem. He asked the master not to be alarmed. However, his son, Uni waited anxiously for Han's arrival. The young man approached. Bumia, meanwhile, worried that her lady might catch a cold, standing there in the cold. The man walked, his hair swaying in the wind. The anxiety kept growing, until Yuni heard the gate opening. Soon the family would finally have answers. Before them a tall man appeared. Yuni was in shock. The woman suddenly fell ill. Lady Min fainted in her bodyguard's arms. Yuni was shocked, since he had imagined that moment many times. Over the course of a decade, he had feared he wouldn't recognize his own son, but that wouldn't be necessary, just as there was no need to ask if he had childhood memories. Yuni was astonished. The young man was strong like him. He had certainly inherited his physical appearance. His long eyelashes and nose were definitely perfect, just like his wife's. For the man, there was no shadow of doubt left. The young man lifted his chin. Yuni noticed something that left him even more frightened. Dake had asked the noble not to be afraid, but Yuni's son was a member of the criminal gang Heirs. The young man before him was no longer an innocent little boy. The Heirs criminal family didn't need to hide. The assassins never left traces or witnesses. Despite the damage being great, Dake lamented that an aristocrat's son had gotten involved with a family like that. Yunin asked if it would be hard to bring him back from there. The group's leader, Sangwol, was no ordinary woman. She claimed to have raised Han as her own son. The boy's kind eyes hardened over the years. Back in the present, Yan told Han to rest, since he must be tired from the long journey there. He thought he would remember some things from his childhood once he reunited with his parents. The young man revealed he thought coming there had been a mistake. No matter how young he'd been, Yan asked him to take his time and look around, since eventually the memories might come back. The man explained they hadn't changed any of the decor in his absence. The young man, believed to be Han, asked if truly nothing had changed. He pointed to a drawing of an orchid made in ink, saying he didn't remember it. Yan was impressed. How would he know that detail? The noble said it had been so long he'd probably forgotten. The drawing was a symbol of his wife's prayers. Yan knew there was no way the boy could know that detail. It was as if he recognized a detail already long stored in memory. Han said he wished to see his sister, since much of his memories were with her. Then Jade arrived. He turned to look at her more closely, but Jade only responded with a cold look. Han stood up happily and greeted his sister. Our brave protagonist asked what his intentions were. She asked what evil entity he was conspiring with. Yan said that was enough. Han replied that the only memories he had of that place were of them playing on the hills. Jade said any child who grew up there would have those memories. She began asking who his best childhood friend was, who were his parents, what was the name of the game they used to play together. But he didn't know. Jade asked what their little Chinese dog looked like. Han had given it to her as a gift and would surely remember it. More and more questions, she demanded he answer at least one of her questions. Han revealed he had already told Master Shim that he had no memories of the palace. Jade asked what kind of son called his father by his title. The protagonist grabbed his hand. The girl said that even if he had lost all his memories, he should certainly remember the beaded bracelet he had worn on his wrist since he was young. The young man admitted with shame that he didn't remember. She couldn't believe he had forgotten the gift from Prince Hanpyeong, a bracelet made of pure jade with a pendant. Yan ordered his daughter to stop. Jade asked how her father could allow himself to be fooled by that man. She said even scars were easy to replicate, and declared she had never seen anyone so shameless as him. The girl was truly disgusted by him. Yan said that was his younger son, brought back to the family. How dare she say he wasn't who he claimed to be? Jade revealed they had always been together, even if his eyes had been closed. For all those years, Han had been in her thoughts. Those memories were persistent. She was holding back her tears. Jade declared that those eyes were not her brother's. Yan said he was a grown man. How could she be so stubborn as to think he'd still have the same look as a child? Han opened the door to leave. Yan asked what he was doing and told him to sit down. He declared that if he had truly lived there as a child, that place shouldn't feel so unfamiliar to him. The girl had confirmed all her suspicions. Yan asked his daughter how she expected someone who had been torn from the family to have all his memories intact. She wanted to know how only his childhood memories had been erased from his mind. For a decade, her father had cruelly punished several frauds who claimed to be her brother. How could her father believe that a stranger with no memories was his son, just because he resembled Lady Min? She asked if he was doing this because of Yan. Yan asked if she would keep hurting her father. Suddenly, a servant appeared, calling for Master Shim, and announced to the three of them that Lady Min had finally woken up. Ah, a new day at the palace. Han entered the room, not knowing what to expect. He remained silent while servants carried trays and more trays of food. Wow, why so much food? Not even at the most abundant restaurant in Pyongyang had he seen such abundance. Ever since he had arrived at that house, the surprises had been constant. Not even in his wildest dreams would he have predicted such a warm welcome. He had even found artworks by famous artists. It really was a twist of fate to see Master Shim, who had acted in such controversial ways his whole life, being fooled by such a cheap trick. When the young man entered that house, he was ready to carry out his mission above all else. It had been hard to control himself ever since. It was pathetic to watch Yun Shim pretend to be a benevolent father. The boy surely felt irritated since he couldn't repeat his acts. He was determined to show no mercy at all. When he finished off Yun, the supposed Han was not a merciful man. The only problem was the girl who was supposedly his sister. The way she had realized he wasn't her real brother was impressive. She wouldn't back down easily. Those arrogant eyes irritated him greatly. She had been born with the cruel blood of the Shim lineage in her veins, so he didn't doubt she would do whatever she wanted. Should he make Master Shim lose his daughter too? No, it was his duty as the younger brother to make sure she found a husband. The cunning young man was willing to put her in a carriage and send her off to a more distant kingdom. He could hardly wait to see her look of defeat. Han believed his time there wouldn't be so boring after all. Then he heard someone call him. Yan Yi offered him some food to try. Han refused, saying he didn't need help eating. The mother offered him another portion to try. She stood up and said there were hazelnuts picked from Muju. With trembling hands, Yan Yi struggled to pick them up. That situation was very awkward for him. The boy noticed a detail. That man in blue. He had been with Yan Yi and Bumia when he arrived. Since he was very large, Han assumed he must be a bodyguard. Han noticed he had an extra finger. That bodyguard was known as Six Finger. Yan Jimmy asked if Han wasn't enjoying the food. He said it was good. Inside, all he wanted was to escape from there. At Jade's palace, his sister, the maps were neatly organized. A golden globe shone. Our protagonist seemed very distressed, but about what? She recalled that she had stared at those maps so much over the last decade that she had almost completely memorized them. Jade had begged Maijin for her travel notebook. It had been edited by feng shui experts. The girl had even found the borders of Shouzian and the rest of the territory. All of that would help her finally find her brother. All those items had helped her deal with her inner darkness and had eased much of her pain. Now, all of that seemed pointless. It was only a matter of time before the city discovered Han had returned. The various bounty hunters, guards, and traveling merchants hired to find him would see the fruits of their efforts. But no one besides her had any idea that man wasn't the real Han. Jade was very depressed thinking about it. Recently, her little brother hadn't even visited her in her dreams. She positioned a ladder toward the roof. The protagonist carefully searched for something hidden under a roof tile. There it was, her pipe. Jade smoked a bit to relax. Only in those moments did she have peace. Then she heard a commotion below. Oh no! A small sparrow fell mid-flight. The men of the palace were impressed by Han's aim. The young man seemed truly confident, but Jade grew furious. How dare he? Her little brother used to be terrified just looking at a small grasshopper. That was definitely an imposter. He grew conceited, receiving praise from the servants. The fake Han had arrived that very morning and was already acting like the heir. It was too ridiculous. Then Jade had a bad feeling. The boy's cruel gaze was directed at her. From a distance, she noticed he was in bow and arrow stance. What was that bastard thinking? Was he aiming at her? But how? Why was he trying to hit her? Oh no, Jade couldn't understand how that could really be happening. He remained in position. His gaze had nothing to do with her little brother Han. She heard the sound of the bow. Oh no, this couldn't be her end. Jade's whole body was trembling. Then the girl opened her eyes and wow, she was fine. Where was the arrow? Han and Jade stared at each other from a distance. He was mocking her. Then he turned and walked away. What was he trying to do, scaring her like that? But she had no answers. The way he had mocked her was unacceptable. Now, the talk around the palace was that the rightful heir had returned. Yubum said it wasn't as clean as before, but she would certainly get it all sparkling again soon. She brought him some cookies to try. The young man asked how she knew he liked sweets. Yubom replied that when he was a little boy, he was always stealing sweets from the kitchen. Han asked why Jade was being so hostile toward him. The lady replied that the years he was away had been very hard for her. Besides missing him, Lady Min had constantly tormented her. Then she told the story that began 25 years ago. Yun Yan Shim had been one of Ban Hyunjio Min's merchants. Exceptionally relentless, he wanted at all costs to become part of Banyo's family, who had no sons. He was clever enough to do favors for powerful lords. However, he treated everyone else with indifference, and with members of lower clans he was cruel. No one else compared to Yen in intellect or willpower, but something unexpected happened. On the day Banyo Min was going to adopt him as a son, the noble's only daughter, Lady Min, fell very ill. The truth was, she had always been in love with Yen Shim. When she found out her beloved would become her brother, she stopped eating. Because of that, instead of being adopted as a son, he would marry her, losing the privileges of a son. Han asked if that was really so bad. Yubum explained he would only inherit Min's wealth if he had been adopted as a son. No one left inheritance to sons-in-law. Besides that, Master Shim also had a mistress whose name was Katnim. Lady Min got so nervous upon finding out that she summoned the city shaman and paid off a traveling merchant. In short, she did everything to separate the couple, but she still managed to force Yen to marry her. That was when Master Shim's heart grew dark out of frustration. He couldn't forgive the woman who had ruined his life. When Lady Min failed to get pregnant even after 3 years of marriage, Banyo brought a concubine for his son-in-law, hoping to become a grandfather soon. That suggestion seemed to please Yen Shim, but it left Yenji devastated. That woman was Jade's biological mother, whose name was Miss Ha. She got pregnant right away, and everyone expected it to be a boy. But cruel fate took Miss Ha away as soon as the child was born, and it was a girl. All Master Shim needed to do was send her back to her family along with some money. But he had fallen in love with Miss Ha and decided to raise the daughter. Lady Min was furious and left the child alone in a residence, forbidding anyone from helping her until her mother's ghost came for her. Master Shim couldn't do anything, but secretly instructed Ai Boom to take care of the child as if she were her own granddaughter. It was during that same period that Lady Min began attending the Gyumganza temple to devote herself to Buddhist practices. She prayed to Buddha for 100 whole days, and so, finally, Yenji got pregnant. People said it was proof of the temple's spiritual power. Yulbeam mentioned that people said the boy was the son of a monk and not of… Oops, she had a very big mouth. To Lady Min, Jade was living proof that her husband had never loved her. The surrogate should never have been called. Even when Jade supposedly stole Han's amulet, Master Shim protected the child. Feelings like hatred, jealousy, and revenge controlled Lady Min, causing her to react very badly to Han's disappearance, treating Jade with great hatred. Yulbeam cried, remembering how many times Jade tried to run away, and ended up suffering a lot because of it. Apparently, the shaman told Lady Min that Jade had been born with negative energies, and if something happened to the child, Yulbeam would be affected too. The only way to prevent tragedies was to marry off Jade Shim to someone. Han asked why Jade was kept confined. Yumbem said she didn't want the girl to lose her value. The lady told him Jade needed to marry a wealthy suitor, for the sake of the business, since no one would accept a wild girl. Han asked where Jade intended to run to. Yumbem explained that Jade always asked to accompany Mujin, Master Shim's adopted son. She wanted to go to Yenjing. Since that wasn't possible, she studied hard, even learning Mandarin on her own. Once the girl stole a horse to run away from the palace. Jade was very determined and started saving money secretly to buy a passport and means to travel. Yumbem sighed, quite worried. Our protagonist's only support was Mujin. Far from there. Such delicious sweets. Mujin and Jade were having tea. Before he returned, Jade spent years looking like a walking ghost. Mujin advised her to open a confectionery shop. That way she would start earning more money and wouldn't need to count coins. Her brother said he would get their father's permission for her to sell her sweets under the Min House name. It turned out Jade Shim was a real businesswoman, and even found a recipe book from the western part of the empire. Mujin asked if she really needed all those books just to make sweets. She explained that desserts were a luxury. The protagonist wanted people to choose her sweets, so they needed to be so special that people had never tasted anything like them. Then Chelmin appeared, letting her know he had a message from the administrator. He wanted to know if she still had some of that liquor she had sent last time. Jade explained she had sent it as thanks for a big order from him, and sometimes she sent liquor or tea. The girl said that this time she could sell him a few bottles. The leading merchants were impressed by her skills. Definitely the daughter of Master Shim. Yubom revealed to Han that the sweet he was eating was a courtesy from her. She said Jade was a very good confectioner. The lady asked if Han remembered the time he picked wild roses for Jade to use in her bath. His hands got hurt by the thorns, so before his mother found out, before Yubom finished the story, she noticed something. Suddenly, beside them was a very pale and quiet boy. She got startled and asked if he was a ghost. Han replied it was just Huichan. That quiet young man was his sworn brother, and since he couldn't speak, he was very stealthy. Yubom thought they looked very physically similar. The lady offered sweets to Huichan, but Han said the boy didn't like them. He assumed Jade would have been spoiled after a life in the palace, but she had been rejected from the start. Her thick skin hadn't been built from arrogance. It was self-defense. Another day begins at the palace. People toasted joyfully. In the middle of the ceremony, men celebrated with drinks. One of them said the drink was excellent. Besides that, the food was wonderful. The banquet was a display of Master Shim's joy at having his son back. One of the men mentioned he'd heard the Min House was expanding its business to Jeju Island. The party was full of merchants hoping for a slice of that deal. More and more drinks were served. Mojin was very serious. Something was deeply bothering him. Several men surrounded the supposed Han, showering the young man with praise. His conceited face disgusted Mojin. He decided to take another sip of his drink. He was certain that man was a fraud and the real Han was no longer alive. But he seemed to be acting very well, especially by putting his life at risk. Mojin realized he wasn't just any ordinary con artist. Far from there, someone slammed an envelope on the floor. Lady Min was very serious. She threw the envelope in front of Jade. The girl picked up the papers. After all, what was written in that letter? Apparently, Yunni intended to send her away like an unwanted package. The woman got angry and asked if she expected a white silk dress and a flower carriage. Being the daughter of a concubine. But why Jiyu? Yumi said she needed to be sent far away so she would no longer put Han's life at risk. If the deal with Lord Koi fell through, it would bring great tragedy to the Min house. Their future depended on that negotiation. Jade ordered her to tell the truth. She was being sent to Jiyu as a hostage. The furious woman asked why she thought she had been cared for all those years. Her only purpose was to marry Jade off to someone and fulfill her part for the family. Jade said everything there already belonged to Lady Min. And because of that, the girl went years without eating well, because she preferred to disappear rather than accept a single grain of rice from her. Jade declared she refused to be sold. She knew that if she were taken to Jeju, the worst could happen, just as it had happened to her mother. The girl would have waited for the ice to melt on the northern river. But there was no more time. That was her final chance, she thought as she gathered her belongings. Suddenly, she heard a frightening noise, the sound of strange footsteps breaking the tile shards around her house. Who could it be? So late at night. The window flew open with a loud creak. Oh my God! A huge shadow approached the girl. Oh no! The supposed Han made a sign for her to stay quiet. But what did he want? Jade didn't know what to expect. He approached, signaling for her not to make noise. Han asked her not to be scared since it was just him. Jade asked how he dared to invade her room. She ordered him to leave immediately, but he simply asked if she wanted her mother to wake up. Han stared at the girl. He said nothing there had changed. Jade asked what he was trying to do. He had already fooled their parents, but the young man wasn't satisfied. Han declared she still wasn't convinced. She asked what that two-faced scoundrel wanted from them. He needed to leave immediately. With an ironic smile, he said he had just arrived. Why should he leave? He said everything became clear the moment he saw her. The girl was very afraid. Han said he was finally home. Jade asked if he thought she would be fooled by his charm. The man said he found it a relief. At least she found him charming. Whoa, what kind of talk is that? She pushed him away, saying that wasn't her brother's nature. Jade declared that Han cried heavily when he lost his pet bird. He was a gentle boy who mourned even the smallest creatures that had nothing to do with the monster in front of her. He asked what he would do to her. Naive girl. Han asked what happens to someone who goes 10 days without eating. The person reaches their limit and starts hunting their own kind. Maybe she thought hunger was no big deal, but people were capable of terrible things. He wanted her to allow him to put an end to all doubt. From the moment someone goes hungry, she would be capable of committing heinous acts. That's what people did. Jade was absolutely certain he wasn't her brother. The man said her eyes had changed too. He declared she was a completely different person now, since her eyes used to be bright like a tiger cub's. But now she looked like an old house cat that no longer felt joy. Jade said she didn't care what he said. He asked if he should call her Little Jade or Jade Shim. The girl grew more and more irritated with him. Han claimed he remembered that day very clearly despite all he'd gone through since then. He reminded her of that spring day when they played on the hills until sunset. The girl asked if he was trying to win her over by making up false memories. Han said he had lost many memories but remembered that day because of the guilt he felt seeing his sister punished by Lady Min. The truth was, they had been late because of him. Because of that, he carried that memory for many years. He smiled at her. Jade got very confused. That was a very personal account. Han said he wouldn't bother her much and asked her to give him some time, but the girl remained silent. Why did he care so much about how she felt? Once she left, she would never come back. Jade would never let herself be fooled by that con artist's words. She had seen several men insist they were her brother. They all wore masks to deceive her family. Monsters pretending to be victims, vulgar clowns doing anything for money. Still, she couldn't understand how he disguised all his traces of malice. Could this supposed Han really be that calculating? She interrupted her own thoughts. That trickster was trying to manipulate her with dirty psychological games. The girl ended up dropping her belongings. Unexpectedly, the bag with her clothes fell to the floor. Oh no! He grabbed the bag with her gold coins. Han said her obsession with money wasn't just a rumor. The man said the amount there would be enough for Jade to reach Yanjing. The girl ordered him to give the bag back immediately, but he was very strong and stopped her. Her hand had a burn on it. That definitely caught his attention. Han asked if she had prayed a lot for his return. Jade said that didn't matter, and wanted to know who he had bribed to find that out. He explained he'd had a hunch, since the Jade he knew would certainly do that. Those words caught the girl by surprise. The whole time, Han placed something in her hand. He said the camellias had already wilted, especially the red ones. Then the man asked her not to leave and to stay there with him. Finally, he left. Jade felt completely powerless. In her past, she looked at her reflection in a basin full of white flowers. She turned to see who had arrived, and from the window, Han smiled at his sister. Jade was slightly petrified. In her hands, Han had placed a white flower, just like from her childhood. The night was calm, and the palace was quiet. Han pushed aside one of the sharp shards. He found the whole thing very tedious. Yueni had said she was sending Jade to Jeju, so he wanted to test the girl one last time. But what had happened to that armor she had worn last time? Han judged that her desire to find her brother had made her sick, just like her mother. She would soon fall on her own, and he wouldn't need to work hard to bring her down. Oh no, he wasn't alone there. Mojin asked how he dared to prowl around his sister's palace. Pushing Mojin away, Han asked what he meant. He asked, "You're the provisional boy, aren't you?" Mojin asked how he dared. Han congratulated the Min House for its variety of products. They even had a talking provisional heir. Mojin demanded to know why he was prowling around those areas. Mojin insisted he answer, but Han just kept mocking him. The man declared it was a shame she was going so far away just to get married. Han also said he and his sister had many secrets, but Mujin told him to shut up. The man with glasses said if he caught him prowling around those parts again, it would be the end of him. Han gave a cold, completely unshaken look and said everything was fine. He declared he agreed with Mujin's words. The other man said he expected nothing less from that heartless bastard and advised him to stop the rumors and return to Pyongan. Han asked if it wasn't Mujin who was acting like he was part of the family. If after 10 years as the provisional boy he still wasn't part of the family rituals, it was because he was doing a terrible job. Han said he should thank him, since he'd look foolish if he arrived and someone competent was already in his place. Mujin asked how much money they were talking about. He knew the supposed Han was there to get money to live a reckless life. The man said if he were smart, he'd take the money and leave immediately. Han said that was a very dishonorable attitude, since he had always been a poor boy. He asked if Mujin really had that money he was offering. In a threatening tone, Han said it didn't matter how he looked at it. Mujin was just a servant. The man said he could provoke him all he wanted. Mujin was determined to watch Han's every move, and it would be only a matter of time before he made a mistake. Han asked if he didn't have his own problems to deal with. He knew his mother's temper, and her men would certainly follow her orders, no matter how cruel they were. Han couldn't stand that stupid guy's pine scent. Mujin was furious. No matter how well dressed he was, a worm was still a worm. It was impossible for that con artist to be Han Shim. He refused to lose to that rat. Even if he had to stain his hands crimson, he would tear off that bastard's mask and reveal his dark heart to the world. Finally, dawn broke over the mountains. The palace was calm until, someone was climbing the wall. Jade, our brave girl, had decided to go through with her plan. There was no one in sight, and so she was able to escape. She needed to reach the mountain valley first. That way she would have Father Thomas's help, since they would cross the border together. But what she found wasn't good at all. The whole chapel was on fire. What could Jade do? She couldn't imagine who had caused that, nor where her friend was. After all, everything had been deserted for hours. Despite the setback, she couldn't abandon her plans. It was better to find a plan B. The girl decided to go to the border alone. Wow, how brave! She grabbed a tree trunk and decided to hide to observe better. She remembered the night when Han told her that her eyes had changed too. Ji-yu was already very tired. She knew that whole conversation had just been a trick. The girl was tired of disguises. He had even asked her to stay there. But for what purpose? That Han was a con artist. She needed to reach the Qing border. Now, she was on her own. Ji-yu was very distressed, but needed to keep going. Suddenly, a noise startled her. She heard footsteps approaching quickly. Could someone be chasing her? They got closer and closer. Oh no! Ji-yu was cornered. The men approached dangerously. The blue bandanas. They were Lady Min's henchmen. What would they do to her? She couldn't be captured. As she tried to flee, the men ran alongside her. Jade refused to be sold off to an old man who lived on some island in the middle of nowhere. But before she could move forward, more men arrived. She spun on her heels to run further. The girl breathed heavily. The trees fell behind. Finally, Jade stopped running. Right in front of her, there was a huge cliff. Unfortunately, her pursuers had already caught up with her. They hunted her like an animal. She ordered them not to come closer. Jade warned that if they took one more step, she would jump. One of them approached, saying that if she fell off the cliff, that would be fine. The man came closer and said he didn't need to bring her back alive. He was Lady Min's bodyguard. Jade grew furious. The cunning woman had sent her most loyal dogs after her. He reminded her that the river had risen because of recent rains. The bodyguard said she would never survive a fall from that height. The river below was churning as if it knew what was about to happen. Jade was very scared, but what could she do? She realized Lady Min hadn't wanted to stop her from going. Instead, suddenly the man lifted her into the air. Oh no. Jade coughed, trying to catch her breath. He had a very cruel look. She just wanted to get out of that situation. The girl realized he only wanted to stun her to carry her back. Then she had an idea. Jade used the small gold knife, a gift from her brother Mojin. However, the man was very strong and didn't even feel it. Jade was certain he was truly a monster. He asked if she hadn't seen what happened to the chapel. The cruel bodyguard said Jade had had a talent for ruining people's lives since she was little. It was time for that to end. She needed to stay calm. There was no way she'd be taken back to the palace. Then Jade had an idea. Her feet came up and, to the cruel bodyguard's misfortune, he couldn't hold on to her. Jade jumped into the river. The man and his henchmen watched the princess disappear into the water. The waters were turbulent. She was barely visible. The bodyguard was in shock. He was disappointed. Meanwhile, the girl was underwater. For the first time, she seemed calm, until a beam of light caught her attention. From below, she found it beautiful how the sun's rays danced in the water. It was as if the sun god had thrown himself into the water and his body was shining. Far from her family's palace, she felt at peace for the first time. She would not be consumed by evil spirits. Suddenly, she felt a sweet scent. Before her eyes, small white flowers appeared. But how was that possible? They were her brother's favorite flowers. In the distance, someone was calling for her. Mujin, her brother, was crying while asking if she could hear him. Fortunately for her, she coughed up a lot of water. The man hugged her, quite worried. He revealed he thought he had lost her. Quite weakened, Jade began to speak, and finally, said she would never go back to the palace. She asked him to help her stand up. The girl knew her brother well. He was a loyal son who never went against their parents. Besides being a virtuous man who would never let her run into danger, Mujin was worried and wanted to take her home. She asked how he could possibly delay the marriage with the island lord. Jade declared he had no power at all, but he insisted he would find a way. Mojin promised that if everything went wrong, he would go with her to Yanjing. That was his word. The girl was annoyed because he was just as oppressed as she was, except unfortunately he wasn't part of the royal lineage. Jade grew sad thinking that he could never save her from that hell, and repeated that she wouldn't go home. She begged him to take her to the border, but he reminded her they couldn't cross until the river froze, and she had no travel documents. Jade insisted now was the perfect time. He asked if she thought he didn't understand her suffering. The girl declared he was just pretending and didn't know anything. After all, Mujin was always away from home, unable to understand what it was like to be confined in the palace. How would he understand the agony of waiting for years without being able to search for her little brother? How would Mojin understand her pain? He was deeply worried about her safety. The man had dropped everything and rowed as fast as he could to save her from the river. Suddenly, torches appeared. The two of them turned to see what was happening. And there, alone by the riverside, the two were ambushed by Lady Min's henchmen. Sometime later, Jade was thrown into a dark room. Oh no. She ordered the men not to hurt her since she would serve as a wedding gift. Uni Min was an extremely cruel woman. She had sent her bodyguard to finish the job, knowing the girl would try to run away in the middle of the night. But that meddler Mojin had to show up and ruin everything. Lady Min threw something on the floor. It was the girl's golden knife. Jade asked if Lady Min thought she would give her everything she wanted so easily, but she didn't answer and just raised her hand. She knocked over a candelabra, snuffing out the candle's light. That gave Jade a terrible chill. Lady Min ordered them to close the door and lock the girl in there. The old woman gave a wicked smile before everything went dark, and so Jade was left alone in the darkness. In the darkness was where the monsters were. The girl could even feel them crawling over her body. Who would protect her from those creatures? She pounded on the doors, calling for help. Jade begged for Yubum. The girl could barely breathe and fell to her knees on the floor. Then suddenly she began to sing a poem from her childhood about a grasshopper flying. But who? Who kept the harmony? Who was capable of bringing change? Suddenly a door opened. A figure in white walked through the courtyard. Who was this mysterious person? Oh, an old well, it looked abandoned. The figure picked up a bucket and poured all the water over their head. Drops of water trickled down their face and clothes. Then he gave a sigh of relief. He noticed spring had returned, and dreams were happening again. Amid the cherry blossoms, some people were talking about what to name the newborn, but the names were quite cruel. One of the children said the new baby was the size of a rat. Such cruelty. The eldest son of Henry Young-Yu's slave. Oh no, something tragic happened. Someone was suffering. Someone else asked if they wouldn't confess soon. A furious man shouted that peach-colored jar was priceless. He'd had to turn to Yun Shim to get it. The woman, crying heavily, said it wasn't her fault or her husband's. That day, the child who had been born lost his parents. Without even the right to mourn, the boy named Guion Sangjui, or as we call him, Gui, had to stay by his young master's side. In secret, that's how he learned to read. Suddenly, his master asked him to fill something with water. Oh no! Wait a minute, that was the peach jar, guilty of him losing his parents. The cruel young master said that if he dropped it, he'd have to answer to him. Gui grew terrified just looking at that little object. The young master Yu had been the culprit all along. The boy never wrote or painted, but his terrible master forced him to grind inkstones day after day. With trembling hands, he tried to reach the peach jar, to finally pour it into the ink mixture. Meanwhile, young Master Yu just laughed until he noticed something. He grew furious because Jiyu had grown taller than him, and so attacked the defenseless boy. Jiyu fell to the floor with a dull thud. His master saw him as an aberration of nature, and cruelly decided the boy would go hungry from then on. But nothing bothered our young Jiyu anymore. Before him, the one to blame for all the evil, the horrid peach jar. It was as if he were becoming indifferent to everything. Then, on a fateful day, everything would change. Young Master Yu couldn't find his precious peach jar. In a fit of rage, Jiyu hurled it to the floor before the boy could stop him. That's right, and the object shattered into several pieces. Young Master Yu was devastated. Unsurprisingly, the boy's punishment came swiftly, and so he was beaten, until he nearly fainted. The floor in front of him was stained red. There was no one to show him mercy. At that moment, he finally felt more relieved. The following month, the also cruel Lord Hendryong ended up passing away unexpectedly. During his breakfast, the household servants celebrated the terrible master's passing, but Gyue couldn't celebrate. Hendryong's wife ordered the boy to watch over her husband's tomb. Was she crazy or what? The woman wanted him to serve food to the spirit and bow in the deepest sign of respect. Frankly, none of it made any sense. Besides that, he would have a little house made of 2 wooden boards. You've got to be kidding. He could hardly believe what was happening. How could someone subject another person to such torment? The woman said he should stay there for 3 years, or not bother coming home at all. Then everyone left, leaving Gyue to fend for himself. As soon as they were gone, Gyue ran as fast as he could, crossing several mountains. That's it, boy. He even managed to find shelter in some caves, and managed to sleep in abandoned houses when he got lucky. But being so young, he knew nothing about hunting, often failing to get food. Because of that, he ate snow. Poor thing, he worried only about surviving that winter. If it stayed that way, he'd have better chances. Then the weather warmed up. You could even see the buds sprouting on the trees. What a beautiful sight. 3 months after his escape, you could hear the little birds singing. So he found an azalea bush and ate from it, and that was his end. Back in the present, Hun poured more water over his head. But for what reason? He stayed silent, thinking about what he'd do next. When the scent of spring arrived, his memories came back like epileptic seizures. The curtains he needed so badly would tear, and everything returned into sharp focus, bathing the past in clarity, which wasn't good at all. That cursed scent of ink and azaleas. But what was funny was that, looking back, those had been the easiest days. All he wanted back then was towers of rice and barley. Hun thought he had never wished so much to say goodbye to that world. He wished that would be his last spring, even if he had to handle it on his own. Since his life was already quite bad, there was nothing to fear. Then Hendry Chan approached and covered his back. Hun looked sideways at the young man, but he never said anything. The man made a gesture to get rid of the cloths. Han left Hui Chan alone in the night. He stood still while the petals fell, and the other man simply left. Days later, someone asked how he knew about Yoon Han. Han explained that after so much hardship in life, he had begun to take an interest in art. Yoon Han noted how hard it was to find Yoon Han's works in person. Yoon Han was happy to know his son still kept the family's refined tastes, even after so long away from home. A servant arrived and greeted the family. He announced that Han had brought wild honey from the mountains. Yoon Han asked how he had gotten that treasure. He said he had a contact who sold honey, and it was especially good for treating illnesses. The servant was ordered to give a cup of that honey to Yoon Han every morning. Lady Min asked if her son remembered going to their uncle's house that time of year. Han replied he would like to visit their family in Hamwol. He told his mother he had just one request. Yoon Han smiled and told her son to ask. Whatever it was, she would grant it. But she was left speechless upon hearing Han ask her to postpone his sister's wedding so she could accompany him on the trip. On the other side of the palace, Yoonbom said she nearly had a heart attack. She asked what the girl had been thinking, doing that, and said she could hardly believe what Jade had done, jumping into the water like that. If it weren't for Master Mujin, they wouldn't be together now. Our protagonist knew that very well. Yoon Han asked why the girl was so upset. After all, Han had returned home. Jade turned and declared that wasn't Han. The girl asked how Yoon Han let herself be fooled by that con artist. How could she not see a fraud that size? Yoon Han replied that it was Master Han who had gotten her out of her confinement. He had gone personally to speak with Lady Min, and right after, the woman gave orders for Jade to be released. Who knows what he told her? Jade imagined the two of them had plans to send her to Jeju, or worse, somewhere even farther away. Yoon Han reminded her that her brother had been a swordsman in the Hawol-ru criminal gang, and that they weren't just cruel debt collectors. The gang's members were quite different. They were assassins. Jade couldn't believe it. Yoon Han compute each of the plans to Kun Pertel. Han would say he didn't remember anything from his childhood. He remembered everything except for that period. The only way he could live with himself after taking human lives would be to convince himself he was an orphan alone in the world. Jade didn't want to hear more of that, but Yuboom insisted and asked if she thought the gang would treat him kindly just because he was a child. The lady explained that if he hadn't succeeded, he would have been abandoned again, and that's why Han needed to forget his past. Unexpectedly, Jade sank into the bathtub. It was a night of a waning moon. Jade was on the roof. She remembered the conversation they'd had a while back about a person being capable of anything once they reached their limit. His words had been very frightening, but Jade couldn't worry about anyone else besides herself. Soon she would be taken to Jeju, and she didn't care about a con artist. All of that was so frustrating, until something caught her attention. A bird flew toward her, but it wasn't just any bird. It was a white dove. The little bird landed beside the girl as if they were already friends. Oh, there was a message tied to its little leg. Jade noticed it wasn't just any pigeon, but a carrier pigeon. But who could have sent it? The message contained the words, Hamwol, uncle, a company, preparations, early morning, stables. She was very surprised. What did that mean? Could it be she'd be taken to Hamwol? She'd been forbidden from going there since Han's disappearance. The note was signed, Han Shim. But what absurd plan could he be cooking up? Jade didn't understand why he'd sent the carrier pigeon, since any servant could have delivered the message. Well, that didn't matter. For our protagonist, it was the perfect opportunity to cross the border. It was her final chance, and Jiyu wouldn't let it pass. As soon as the sun rose, Mujin told his sister he didn't want her to leave like that. In recent days, Jade had seemed to grow weaker, even though she asked him not to worry. Mujin explained he was investigating some things on his own, so she could travel in peace, and told her to return safely. He knew his optimistic words were empty, and considered making her flee far away. Jade didn't seem very cheerful. What was she thinking about? Mujin didn't know what to do. His heart pounded anxiously. The protagonist was very sad, thinking this would be the last time they'd see each other, and they wouldn't even get to say a proper goodbye. He didn't like seeing her so sad. Mojian held her hand and asked her to tell him why she was so sad. Interrupting the beautiful moment, Han arrived saying the two of them were making too dramatic a farewell, like two lovers. The two of them got annoyed just seeing that meddler arrive. Suddenly, Yuboom arrived and called for Han. She told him he couldn't set off on such a long trip without some snacks. But Han asked Yuboom to give the food to Jade, since he'd be happy to see her fed. The lady was impressed that he had stopped Jade's wedding and even gave up his food for her. He was practically a saint. That exaggeration left Jade and Mojian speechless. They didn't know about the wedding. Mojian assumed Lady Min was capable of anything for her son. However, our protagonist didn't understand the reason for that request. Yuboom insisted he accept the cookies. They were from Jade Shim's own confectionery and were very good. He accepted the package with some satisfaction. Mojian grabbed one of the cloths and had a revelation. Oh no, it was the Sineon sword, which belonged to Yen Shim. The arrogant man would leave with his head held high, taking a family heirloom, but he would never be allowed to return, because Mojian was determined to stop him. The forest quickly fell behind. The braid with the ribbon also swayed. Where was the horse going? Jade galloped with an entranced look. The protagonist seemed enchanted by the forest. Han shouted for her to slow down. Behind her, the man asked if she was running from the law. Why such a hurry? He knew he could catch up to her, but Jade sped up as if she were in a race. Our girl really was a talented horsewoman. She looked back and saw Han staring at her. The man matched her pace, and the two continued through the forest. Finally, night fell. Phew. Finally, a stop for the horses to drink water. Han explained they were far from any village and would need to rest there. The horses were also exhausted and needed a break. While he got off the horse, she said everything was fine. The wind made a soft sound passing through the silver grass. Jade had read about that grass in her research books, but it was much more beautiful than the limits of her imagination. What a privilege to see it in person. The protagonist was impressed by the landscape. She breathed in the scent of the river at night. The girl began walking distractedly through the tall grass. Han thought it was the last straw. Them sleeping there was her fault. After so much time confined, Jade must be very entertained. He thought maybe he shouldn't have stopped the wedding and just let her go to Jeju. The man remembered when he found out she had jumped into the river. Yuboom explained she was determined to do anything to escape that. At first glance, he thought she was just a spoiled girl. Then he saw that Jade was just a defenseless little girl. But later he discovered she was actually very determined, capable of facing the worst things to survive. Han judged it wouldn't be so bad to be by the side of such a fearless girl. He'd even liked the idea of turning that girl's life upside down. Well, now the man thought his own attitude was reckless, since he could have gotten himself into a lot of trouble with Lady Min. When he looked at Jade again, she had already wandered far into the tall grass. How far did that girl still want to go? Then he decided to follow her. Jade ordered him to stop following her. Han said she'd hate it if she got lost in the tall grass, since it would be very hard to find her way back. The girl said maybe that was exactly what he wanted for her. The man declared he didn't know if she was very brave or very stupid. Jade told him to stop playing games and reveal his intentions. She explained they weren't at home, there were no servants, and this was the moment for him to tell the truth about who he was. Jade asked why he had canceled her wedding, and if he was going to finish her off right there. Han said she must be joking. He said someone who wanted to hurt her wouldn't bother bringing her all the way there. Jade couldn't believe Lady Min had simply changed her mind. The protagonist declared he must have bad intentions. Han asked if it was time for him to reveal his bad intentions. He got closer, asking if she really wanted to know. Jade told him to reveal it. He revealed she was a talisman. The protagonist asked what he was talking about. What nonsense was that? Lady Min had told him it wasn't a bad idea for him to travel, accompanied by someone who could withstand the dangers of the road. That's why Jade was chosen. Because if he ran into danger, she would be used as a bargaining chip. Such cruelty. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. He then asked if she was satisfied to discover the real reason for the trip. Now Jade felt ridiculous. Poor her. But our girl was very clever and asked why he wanted her to accompany him. She was certain he didn't think like Lady Min. Was he trying to please her in some way? Huyan gave an ironic laugh and asked if he should remind her of her position within the Min house. He asked why he would even try to please her. It's not like she was a sweet, agreeable girl. But Jade wouldn't accept those answers and kept asking the reason for all of it. Finally, Huyan replied it was because no matter how much she hated him, they were still siblings. He explained they were still flesh and blood and wanted to know how she'd want to say goodbye again, after so many years apart. Huyan asked how he could just stand there watching her be carried off to Jeju, to see Jade married to a repulsive old man. The protagonist saw sense in his words, but everything still felt very confusing to her. She thought about the word family. Could he really be her brother? Her heart raced a little. Jade turned and began to walk away from him. Huyan grabbed her shoulder and told the girl not to walk away. She spun around quickly with a small knife, telling him to stay away. The man skillfully grabbed her hand. Oh no! What could Jade do now? Jade ordered him to let her go immediately. Han asked if she wanted to make a memorable scene right there. He said because of her arrogance, the girl hadn't realized she was in a dangerous situation. Lucky for her, they were siblings. The protagonist told him to shut up while she pushed him away. In the middle of that, her knife fell, but Han kicked the knife away before she could grab it. It was too far for her to reach. The man asked why that insignificant little thing was so important to her. Jade asked what he was trying to do. That bastard! Han said whoever gave her that knife was the real bastard. The girl told him to shut up because he didn't know anything. He explained that small weapon wouldn't save her from anything and would end up getting her badly hurt if she were in danger. Jade asked why he cared so much. The protagonist told him to stop stalling and find her knife. Now, that item was the only thing of value she had. She thought while searching through the tall grass. Jade wouldn't forgive herself if she lost that knife. But Han just remained silent while she searched. He held her arm and asked her to stand up, but she told him to let her go. And then surprisingly, he revealed he was holding the knife. Wow, how was that possible? The girl tried to grab it back, but he dodged quickly. Arg, that bastard was making the protagonist very irritated. He told her to look more carefully. Again, the knife in his hands was made of wood, not gold. Jade hesitated, since it was a discreet weapon used by stealthy assassins. Han told her the knife was made from a special tree that had been struck by lightning. It was lighter than a gold knife and would help her defend herself if something happened. The man noticed how indifferent she was to hair accessories, jewels, elegant clothes, and even decorative ornaments. But Jade seemed drawn to anything that could help her defend herself. He took the knife from her hand and explained the obsidian blade was lighter than metal. Han said she should learn to hold it properly, or she could get hurt. He hugged Jade from behind and gave a demonstration, saying she should press that part with her thumb to protect herself. The man touched her neckline, teaching her where to aim, in the area below the neck between the collarbones. She needed to be careful not to hesitate, or it could be fatal. But his touch in that area was leaving Jade breathless. She asked him to remove his hand from there. The protagonist explained she knew all about pressure points, but Han argued she needed to stay focused and remember his instructions. She felt he was too close. Why was she feeling that way? The truth was, Jade felt very strange. She could feel her own pulse racing, the warmth of his body against her shoulder. Even his silky hair tickled her neck. The wind kept blowing through the tall grass. Close to him, Jade could even smell the sweet scent of peppermint. Han looked at his sister with curiosity. Jade didn't know how to interpret that look. He came a little closer, but she elbowed him and he asked what was wrong with her. The protagonist thought about how nervous she'd gotten because he'd come too close. The knife was such a special item to her that she hadn't even noticed. He noticed her braided hair. Han slid his fingers through the red cloth and undid the braid. Wow! Jade was caught off guard. The girl asked how he dared. Han replied, he wouldn't give up something so valuable without getting something in return. She demanded her gold knife back, but he just asked if she knew how rare a lightning wood knife was. Instead of worrying about such a cheap item, Jade said he was being very arrogant, but Han said that knife was a talisman against evil spirits. On top of everything, she asked what he was talking about. The man said even that hair ribbon was poor quality, just a scrap of cloth. Han asked if she hadn't accumulated any items of value. After she revealed the gold knife was the only valuable thing she had, he asked if she had nothing more feminine like jade rings, shiny necklaces, precious stones. Finally, he said they were even now. Han said he was at a loss having given up a valuable item, but didn't want to be heartless with his little sister. Jade thought he was too talkative and she'd never win an argument with him. The night continued. The tall grass shone silver. Phew, the two managed to make a campfire. He heard his sister ask why he had sent a carrier pigeon to her in the middle of the night. Instead of talking to a servant, Han explained he didn't want to wait for morning to arrive. If he had sent a servant, his mother would certainly have intercepted it, and other problems would arise. He told her he wasn't a child anymore, and now his actions were carefully thought out. Besides, sending carrier pigeons was fun. He liked fun things and wanted to show her something fun. Han picked one of the tall grasses. Jade watched him break the stalk into smaller pieces until he was satisfied. He took a breath, and to our surprise, Han played a sweet melody. The protagonist was impressed. The delicate music filled the night. Even the silvery grass seemed to be in the same harmony. The melody was clear, soft, and calm, but suddenly it stopped. He handed the plant stalk to her, saying it was now her turn, though he doubted she was capable. Jade got very irritated, took the item from his hand, asking how hard could it be. The girl took a breath to play the improvised flute, but she couldn't, and just made a sound like an elephant. She heard him laughing hysterically beside her. The more she tried, the more she sounded like an elephant, and Han couldn't stop laughing. Jade said she was distracted because of her hair and that it was all his fault. She heard him calling her, a shooting star was passing across the sky. Han said if she made a wish on a shooting star, it would come true, but she needed to be quick. Jade asked what he was talking about, but her brother was already pointing at another shooting star. Wow, it was a beautiful sight. The two of them were enchanted by so much beauty. For the first time, Han seemed calm. He noticed that a minute ago she'd been fighting with him over a knife, but now the girl was focused, making her wish to the star. Han imagined Jade was desperate for her wish to come true, while he, on the other hand, didn't believe in those legends. He examined the piece of red cloth. Fabric like that was something so cheap, not even a servant would buy something so shabby. Han was distant, lost in his thoughts. Jade was very focused, since it was probably a very special wish. Han even felt sorry for the girl. The hours passed and only ashes remained of the fire. The two fell into a heavy, peaceful sleep. Jade seemed far off in the land of dreams. Or not quite. She woke up looking a bit down. She got up without making a sound. The girl noticed her brother must be in a very deep sleep indeed. She moved away from him. Wow, and her clothes fell off. She left silently, and walking on the very tips of her toes, Jade reached the river. The moon was high in the night sky, and the girl walked silently toward the water. She tested the water's temperature. Brr, so cold. But even so, Jade got into the river. Despite the cold, the water was very nice and relaxing. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't sleep in the dark her whole life. However, Jade realized she was very far from the palace. There was no need to fear a shadow spirit. Not anymore. The moon's reflection played on the water. Our protagonist finally felt at peace. Jade decided to drink a little of that water in honor of the moon. She wanted to make a toast celebrating how close she'd gotten to the border. Then she decided to drink a bit more, as a farewell toast to the Min house. And lastly, she'd make a toast of apology for not properly saying goodbye to Mujin. The atmosphere around her felt magical. Well, it was time to head back. She looked over at Han to see if he was still asleep. The man slept like a rock. From that angle, he even resembled her little brother. Jade thought that thanks to him, she'd managed to get so far. The protagonist remembered the conversation where he'd reminded her they were family. But the truth was, she still couldn't fully trust him. Were they really family? The sky began to lighten and some little birds began to sing. Jade was peacefully asleep. Out of nowhere, Han got up very quickly. He seemed a bit embarrassed. Han could still remember her going to bathe. Oh my god. Ha, trying to push those thoughts away, he rubbed his face. Better to just let it go. Early in the morning, the horses were already awake. Jade woke up as her horse went to drink water. The girl stretched, noticing how well she had slept. She noticed something different. Beside her, Han had left the gold knife. Wow, he found it. How sweet. Jade was happy that, despite how he acted, he'd been kind enough to return it. Despite that, she couldn't find him anywhere around the camp. He probably hadn't gone far. The protagonist got up and announced she was awake, calling for her brother, but no one answered back. She called for Han again. Where could he be? He himself had told her about the dangers of getting lost in the tall grass, but apparently he hadn't left any trail. A huge chill ran up the girl's spine. Because of that, she started running. Jade declared that if this was some kind of joke, it wasn't funny at all. She called for him again, but no sign of him at the river. Oh my god. The protagonist was already growing tired, but still no sign of him by the water's edge. Oh no. Could he have been taken by some enemy? His belongings and horse were still at the camp. Once again, he'd vanished without a trace. Just like it happened 10 years ago. Jade collapsed on the ground. That left her devastated. She had already been through all of that before, and all the effort in the world hadn't been enough to find him. Soon the news would reach the Min house. Those memories would stay forever in her head. Night and day, she had tried for years to use tricks to forget the pain. The waiting had turned into resentment and danger. The guilt was a fierce dog that hunted her. Then a tear fell, and soon after, another and another. Jade couldn't bear to go through that again. Suddenly, someone asked what she was doing, sitting on the ground crying for no reason. Phew! Han had returned to the camp. He looked at her with a face like he didn't understand anything. Jade started to ask him where. But she grew furious and asked for heaven's sake, where had he been? The man simply replied he had gone to gather some berries. However, he revealed something more. He told her he had found some assassins hiding, ready to ambush them. But what happened? He was completely alone. He told her that the night before, Han woke up and stirred the campfire wood a bit. He had already noticed 2 assassins near the horses. While Jade slept, he also spotted one more. This one was hidden in the silvery grass behind him. Since they hadn't attacked right away, Han was certainly the target. The man secretly thought Mujin was behind that ambush. He felt relieved that at least Jade would be safe. Han moved away from the girl and walked through the tall grass. The henchmen saw the perfect opportunity. They charged toward Han, ready for the attack. But they didn't count on his agility. Oh my god. Something flashed and came rapidly toward them. Wow, 2 of the 3 henchmen were knocked out in front of the third. The masked man asked how they could have fallen so quickly. He knew Han had been trained by the Hawolru. But even so, how could he be so skilled if he wasn't even 20 years old yet? Nothing moved in the grass. Upon seeing a silhouette, she judged it was time to attack again. He ran toward the target, but was intercepted with the same ease. He fell to the ground with a dull thud, and Han waited. In the morning, he remembered it had been hard to hide the bodies. But he went back to looking at Jade. The girl had been very sad during the short time he'd been gone. He couldn't believe she had missed him so much. What had happened to the girl who could barely look at him? But Jade wasn't responding. Our protagonist just cried and trembled. Poor thing. He still provoked her further, wanting to know why. She stood up and he thought she must be lost in memories from the distant past. Han promised he'd stick to her from then on, like a barnacle stuck to a ship. But our girl still couldn't say anything. He began to grow quite worried. She seemed very different. Then Han took her hand and placed her hand on his neck. Jade asked what he was doing. The girl, very surprised, heard him reveal that his pulse was racing too. His heart was beating so heavily that Jade could feel it through her fingers. He promised he would never leave her again. Wow, what a beautiful moment. There by the river, Han made a promise to Jade. When they finally arrived in Hamwol, their uncles were deeply moved, welcoming back the nephew who had been missing. Certainly, he was the spitting image of his mother. Then their cousin Eungyo invited them to a picnic near a small lake with a waterfall, where they used to play as children. Ah, it was such a lovely place. Eungyo said the weather was very refreshing. He said Han could take off his clothes so he could relax more, but the man refused. Han asked if that was where they used to play as children. Eungyo told him they used to fish for small fish and crayfish in that lake, and when it got cold, they'd sprawl out under the afternoon sun. Then the cousin saw the scar on Han's wrist. He said it had been from a little fight they'd had with wooden swords. Jade listened to the conversation carefully. Among the snacks were the famous yakwa cookies. Jade was happy and grabbed one for herself. Then she noticed an important detail. Han was eating a cookie wrapped in paper. Since childhood, he had refused to eat yakwa without napkins, so as not to dirty his fingers. She remembered their last night together, when he had brought her cookies. Despite loving yakwa, he hated the feeling of sticky fingers from the caramel. Could that man really be the real Han? The image formed before her eyes. He looked so much like her little brother. Jade grew worried. Could it be possible? She had spent so much time thinking he was just another con artist and not her brother Han. The protagonist felt upset with herself for not being able to see clearly in that situation. Then, before she could say anything, Han and Eungyo stood up to take a walk. On their heels, there were 2 parallel scars. That was quite strange, a detail she didn't remember. How could he have gotten those 2 marks on his heels? The late afternoon was beautiful in the mountains. Jade noticed the sun would soon set, until she heard the sound of footsteps approaching. There was Han. He carried 2 large candlesticks in his hands. Soon after, he lit a candle. Jade asked if he had gone there to light candles for her. He said yes, since she couldn't sleep in the dark. He said unfortunately he could only give her 2 measly candles, but he was happy to help her. The girl thanked him, still a bit suspicious. Besides that, she thanked Han for having helped her cancel the wedding and the trip to GU. However, the man declared that if she were truly grateful, she should look him in the eyes and not say he was a stranger. He stared at her more intensely. Jade felt a bit intimidated by that closeness. She thought for a few moments when she looked forward he had gotten even closer. She had no doubt his physical appearance was truly very similar to Lady Min's, but his gaze didn't resemble her little brother's at all. The girl swallowed hard. For Jade, it was hard to look directly into his eyes. Holding the girl's face in his hands, he turned her to face forward. Wow, he kissed her. Oh my god, what was happening? He asked if she had finally understood. Han wanted to know if he was a stranger or her brother. Jade blushed deeply and asked if he'd lost his mind. That situation was very strange. The girl pushed him away, and Han said it was just a joke and she could stay calm. Jade asked what he was thinking. He teased her, saying he could even see little wrinkles on her face. Han said she should hydrate more, since now she was looking like the older sibling in the relationship. He told Jade to let it go, and that he would sleep next to her that night, like in the old days. Our protagonist was very irritated and told him to get up immediately. Han revealed that on rainy nights like that one, he thought a lot about her, and confessed he still had a fear of the sound of thunder. Outside, a big thunderclap struck. Jade fell silent. She had asked him so many questions, from who his childhood friend was to other memories. She had even asked him what their little dog looked like, and the last gift he'd gotten from their grandfather. The truth was, many imposters had even gotten those questions right, but the masks always eventually fell. People didn't really change. Or at least someone's true nature couldn't be faked. She clenched her fist tightly and ordered him to leave immediately. She repeated the orders and grabbed his clothes. Our brave protagonist threw Han out like he was a dog. He looked back, but what Jade saw was her brother with a sad expression. She closed the doors and took a deep breath. At one of the Min House palaces, at Mujin's residence, he asked Cheolmin if the assassins hadn't simply fled with the money, but the assistant said he'd only given 3%, so that wouldn't be the reason. Mujin found it inexplicable that 3 assassins couldn't handle 1 man alone. Cheolmin apologized but had no idea what had happened. Mujin asked if he'd gotten any informant in Pyongyang. The assistant said the man claiming to be Han was at least 20 years old. In Hywol-ru, there was a hierarchy based on age, and he'd joined the clan when he was 15. But how could that have happened? Songwol, the group's leader, had found him badly wounded in the Year of the Rabbit. An informant working for them had confirmed that information. Mujin didn't understand, but Cheolmin explained no one knew for sure, but it had been quite difficult to take care of him, since every time he regained consciousness, he said he didn't deserve to live. Not even the best doctors knew what to do. He only recovered because Songwol refused to give up on him. She prepared the best remedies to keep him well, like a mother would. There were even rumors he might be her secret son, and when the boy recovered, she hired a renowned teacher to educate him. Mojin didn't understand how that woman could be Han's mother. Cheolmin said he suspected the quiet young man who accompanied him. The assistant said his name was Hui-chan. He'd joined the Hywol-ru a year ago, becoming very close to Han. Unfortunately, Cheolmin had no information about the boy's past. After she adopted Han, Songwol fired all her men and hired new members. Because of that, there were no records from that period. Mujin said there must be a deeper connection between Songwol and Han, and asked Cheolmin to keep searching for information. He asked if there was any news of Yisu. Apparently, he'd be visiting soon. Mujin declared Yisu was a great childhood friend of Han's. He'd certainly recognize an imposter if he saw one. He let out a long sigh and went to see his father. To the boy's surprise, Yan said he would send him to Tsushima Island. But why? What was going on? Moments before, Yan asked if he was certain. The man replied, the information had come directly from agents of the trading house, known for their investigations. The investigators had combed every corner of the province but found no information about Han before he arrived at the Hywol-ru family. That was impossible, unless that man had completely falsified his identity. Yan found the whole thing very strange. Since he had already accepted him as a son, it would be a huge scandal if it were discovered that Yan was investigating his past, especially if his wife's family found out. The servant said if he offered a generous reward, someone would certainly bring information. Yan ordered everything be arranged in secret. Master Shim asked if he had any information about Songwol. She had arrived at Hywol-ru very young, and by 30 she was already running the family business, managing brothels and even the assassins. No one dared to defy her. Yan knew her reputation was remarkable, but it was strange that their paths had never crossed. Then Mogyun arrived to talk. He ended the meeting and said they'd talk later, and so the son arrived. Mogyun revealed to his father that the supposed Han was at least 3 or 4 years older than the missing boy. Yeon told his son to be quiet, but Mogyun protested. There were many strange elements in that story. Everything seemed too suspicious. The father insisted he didn't need to worry about anything, and for that very reason he would be sent to Tsushima Island. Oh no, Mogyun couldn't understand those plans. Yeon ordered him to take cotton fabrics, tiger pelts, whatever he wanted to sell and become independent. Moojin would like to finish his work at the Minhee house first. The father asked if his son would prefer a ginseng field in another province. Then, that was all he could offer. Moojin begged his father not to send him away, but the man simply replied he would arrange enough for Moojin to live comfortably. The young man felt he was just a piece on a chessboard. He had been bought for a purpose, and now would be discarded. Yeon's cruel words echoed in Moojin's mind, about there being no real place for him in that house. His name was a constant reminder of that. She had even said that if he tried to take Han's place, he would suffer a horrible fate. The woman was cold as ice. The days in Hamel passed like a flash. Everyone was happy, but it was time for Jade and Han to return. He noticed his sister was quite down. Was she out of energy to gallop off like crazy again like last time? She said she didn't want to sleep by the river again. Now Jade wasn't in any hurry. She needed an opening to escape to the north. It would soon start raining, and it was good they hurried. The first drops had already begun to fall. Then they arrived at an inn and he asked if there were any rooms available. The owner said there were several empty rooms to choose from. She pointed to a bigger suite at the end of the hallway and more empty rooms in another direction. The lady said they didn't seem married. Were they lovers then? Jade quickly said no. She was very annoyed at the old woman's boldness. They weren't lovers at all. She took advantage of the situation and said she'd offer separate rooms. When the rain went away, the sky had a lovely orange color, and the day was coming to an end. The two of them enjoyed the late afternoon in a pumpkin field. Han took a generous sip of the drink, then offered it to his sister. He was impressed by how fast she drank. Our protagonist seemed quite relaxed. Her smile was so cute. She remembered how other houses in the city always had pumpkin flowers on their roofs. But at the Min House palaces, the roofs were always empty. Han asked her never to repeat that story to anyone, since people wouldn't feel sorry for a privileged girl like her. Jade said everything felt more tragic when she lived her whole life alone. He asked about her parents. The girl revealed sadly that Yeon wouldn't even notice if she disappeared. As for Lady Min, she'd certainly finish her off if she could. That woman was a sly fox. Han thought she was being dramatic. Jade remembered very well the horrible moments she'd lived through with Lady Min. He thought that apparently coming back had saved her life. The worst part was that his words held a bit of truth. The man judged that despite everything, she had lived a simple life. She even had Grandma Yubom to open up to. But Jade had lived like a prisoner for many years. Jade took many years to understand that Lady Min wanted her to disappear. She couldn't hurt the girl over some ridiculous legend and preferred she perish in the streets. Han said she should have married and left. But Jade explained she would never marry, since that would just be another kind of prison. He asked if she smoked nonstop all day. Soon she'd have a man's voice. Jade revealed it was the only thing that gave her peace. Then her brother suggested she cut back on alcohol, but she only felt happy when she drank. Poor thing. Han suggested she release her anger in other ways. Break some objects, cry out loud. That way she could feel more relaxed. But Jade explained to him that they would just beat her for crying like a baby. One more thing our protagonist didn't have the right to do. The girl explained that was how she'd been raised. Her birth was seen as a symbol of bad luck. Some praised her father, others condemned her just for existing. Ever since then, she dreams of leaving. Han said she still had a lot to do in life and wasn't at rock bottom yet. Dreaming was a great sign of that. For him, the end of the line was when you no longer dreamed at all, and anxiety made it impossible to sleep. He reminded her that he too had been imprisoned. Jade grew very worried about him. The girl grabbed his shoulder and insisted he reveal who had done that to him. Han knew the person's name. He could see it even with his eyes closed. That cruel man was Jungpyo Kim, a human trafficker. That cruel man had been responsible for taking the boy as a hostage. The boy had no choice but to follow him. He just didn't want to be hungry anymore. But the relief wouldn't last long, since he was imprisoned in an underground tunnel. Like him, several other boys were confined there. After a long time in the darkness, the boy heard Yeonshim's name once again. He had been the one responsible for finding boys with porcelain white skin, and that's why that tunnel had been dug. The boy, Giri, feared that if his name were found out, he would be sent to another trafficker, so he hid his name. He also didn't want to be sold to another family, and so they nicknamed him Jodo. After 6 months underground, he finally got out. His skin had become as thin as paper with bluish tones, and so the boy was sold to Yeonshim as a gift for Prince Hanpyeong. But he wasn't the only one. Prince Hanpyeong's palace had several boys like Jodo. They were numbered by order of arrival according to a 60-year cycle. and so the gates of hell opened immediately. Back in the present, Han seemed distant. Jade insisted Han tell her who had imprisoned him. He said it had been so long ago, and he didn't remember anymore. He'd gone through so many things that he ended up forgetting. The man asked what difference it would make if he told her. Jade couldn't go out hunting those people down to teach them a lesson. Our protagonist got quite emotional over the conversation. Han noticed the change in her, and his heart raced faster. He asked if she knew anything about his past, about who he'd been. Jade then remembered. Days before, Grandma Yubom and she had talked about Han having been part of the Haiwolru assassin family in Pyongyang. He had become a reaper, and his job only ended when he crossed names off a list. Whoever gave the names were people rich enough to afford it. Han said with melancholy that some said life and death were in divine hands, but he didn't think that was still true. Jade asked who had forced him to do those things, but he revealed it had been himself. In the first days after a job, he used to get very sick, filled with regret over having ended those people's lives. But as time passed, he got used to it and became very good at what he did. Jade said he was ridiculous, and he really was. He revealed his codename was Viper, a snake so venomous whose poison had no antidote and would finish someone off before they even realized it. Han said he was so determined to be the best assassin that he trained countless days. Jade wanted to know why, and he confessed that when someone became a target, all one could hope for was that their passing would be quick and painless. That way they could be spared unnecessary suffering. That was his real job. All the members of the Haiwolru family were known for leaving no trace of their work, but Han, the Viper, was the best of them all. So he brought a lot of money to Haiwolru. His services weren't cheap, but they never stopped coming. Jade was certain someone must be using him and still making a great profit. Han declared there had been only one savior, the one who freed him, fed him, and trained him well. It was Songwoo. All his other actions had been by his own choice. His story left Jade very emotional. He stayed silent, waiting for her to say something. Then Han asked her not to worry about finding the bad guys to avenge him. He just asked that she stay by his side and comfort him during the hard times. Wow, that was a very unexpected request. The protagonist said those were just empty words. Han asked what she'd prefer. She told him that every time she'd wished for a straw-roofed house of her own, Mojin would say he'd give her one as a gift. Han asked if he had actually bought it. Jade said that's just how it was. Anyone could make empty promises. So she ended up asking for money instead of the house. The protagonist confessed she also thought about her next life. Han asked if she'd like to reincarnate. She said she was so screwed in this life that all she could hope for was that the next one would be better. He wanted to know what she had wished for, her reincarnation. Had she wished to be a beautiful princess in a castle? But actually, she wanted quite the opposite. She preferred a simple life. As the youngest of a big family, she'd rather live far from luxury in a straw shack with 8 siblings. Han saw no sense at all in her wish. Jade preferred anything to that cursed name and to a family that didn't want her. She wanted to feel loved and cherished by her own people. She dreamed of fighting with her siblings over food, sleeping in crowded rooms with legs tangled together. The girl didn't mind wearing clothes handed down from older sisters, nor walking through markets holding hands. She didn't mind the hardships of a simpler life, as long as she was part of a united family that loved her. That was Jade Shim's true wish. Han held himself back for a few moments, and then he said that was the stupidest wish he'd ever heard in his life. He asked where she'd gotten such ideas from. Families like that always had alcoholic parents or violent siblings. Many of them also had gambling debts, rats roaming the ceiling and fleas in the blankets. Someone like Jade would never be able to sleep in a shack like that. Worst of all, if she'd been born a woman, in a time of need, she could be sold for sacks of food before she even turned 7. With some luck, she could become a palace servant, but she could also end up working at the circus or other establishments. Enough. He had gone too far. Han hoped another shooting star would pass so she could cancel that stupid wish and choose something better for herself. The protagonist asked who he thought he was to tell her what she had to do. He'd rather reincarnate than be born into a family like the one in her dreams. That conversation left Jade deeply hurt, especially since she would soon be leaving. How could that con artist seem so real? If he really were an imposter, the most logical move would be to get rid of her. But according to Yubum, he had begged the cruel Lady Min to stop the girl's wedding. She regretted having offended him with her words. When the rain began to fall, she realized she had already drunk too much. After a long night, the sun was about to rise. In his room, Han was having a restless sleep. He clenched his jaw. What was tormenting him so much? Once again, the nightmares of that fateful day came back to him. The treatment he received was very different from what he expected. First, Jaha was bathed with waters scented with flower petals, and then he was given a silky body oil. Finally, he was dressed in the purest, softest silk he had ever felt. Then the boy Jodo had a big surprise, and a banquet was served containing delicacies from all over the country. He could hardly wait to eat. The boy ate with the appetite of a lion. He gulped down the soups quickly, until Jodo noticed a peculiar detail. Even though there were other boys with him, strangely, most of them hadn't touched the food. Jodo asked why the young man beside him wasn't eating, but they said nothing, just looking at him with empty expressions. The boy found that very frightening. He wondered why the boys had blue bruises on their chins. Could they all have the same illness? Jodo could smell a subtle scent of blood and medicinal herbs. Maybe that place was some sort of care home for sick boys. Even the clothing was strange, since it only opened at the back. He couldn't understand what was happening. One of the boys in front of him started crying. But what could be the reason for the tears? The young man didn't even have any spark in his eyes. Gyudo got very scared. He decided it was time to get up, and he walked through the empty courtyard, understanding nothing at all. He looked around to see if no one else was coming, and began to feel very sick. Gyudo ran off. Right in front of him, there was a well. That was exactly what he needed. He held on to the edge, and then the boy let out a scream that seemed to expel bad energy from inside him, but ended up discovering an alarming fact. His face was as pale as the other boys, and his clothing was very similar to theirs, also tied at the back. Something was very wrong there, but Gyudo couldn't understand it. The palace became an oppressive figure. He couldn't imagine how he could escape that terrible place. The sound of wind passing through the bamboo caught his attention, and then he ran. The trees seemed like the ideal hiding spot, he thought as he dashed through the vegetation. But behind him, there was already a pursuer on horseback. The terror kept growing. Suddenly, a rope flew toward him. Oh no! Jihoju had been captured like a farm animal. He also ended up gagged. His cruel captor had a harsh punishment for him, pinning him to the ground, and that's how Gyudo got scars on his heels. It was as if he couldn't escape the nightmare. He opened his eyes, and when Han realized it, he was in the same position from years ago. He remembered the delicate hands of a person, the same hand that picked up a sharp needle. Oh no! Prince Hanpyeong was the cruel person stitching up the wound. While preparing to flee, Jade heard a scream. She thought Han was having a nightmare, but he seemed to be sleeping so heavily. It wasn't the time to feel sorry for him. Jade just wanted to run far away and never come back. She had all the right items and the rain had stopped. There was no better time to leave, so why did something seem to be holding her back? She remembered Han asking her not to worry about revenge. He had only asked her to stay by his side. The girl dropped her bundle of belongings on the floor. Our protagonist entered her brother's room, quite worried about him. Oh no! He was crying so much. What was happening? She grabbed his clothes and told him to wake up. It was just a dream, and it wouldn't hurt him. She had an idea and raised her hand. Jade slapped him several times, repeating for him to wake up once and for all. Before she could continue, he raised his hand, and the protagonist was pulled down. Suddenly, Han was on top of her, with a small blade in his hands. Oh my god! Jade swallowed hard. The blade was very close. His tears were still rolling down his face. It was such an anguishing scene. But what could the girl do? It hurt a lot, and she remembered the scar on her hand. Suddenly, something slid off his clothes. Oh, was it a little pouch with a mint scent? The protagonist wondered why he carried an accessory like that. It was quite a feminine item. Could it have been a gift from someone special? But who could it be from? Han seemed to be coming back to himself, but was very weak. He looked closely at the girl in front of him. It seemed the man couldn't take it anymore. And finally, he collapsed on top of his sister. Jade told him to get off her. He declared to her that she didn't need to hit so hard. Surely the girl had been waiting for that opportunity. Han confessed it was the first time that it happened. He didn't usually wake up in the middle of nightmares. Jade wondered how many terrible things he must have gone through to have such bad, recurring nightmares. Could that have happened because he had given her his tiger claw amulet? Jade looked toward the window and noticed that dawn was already breaking. That was her chance to escape. If she pushed him aside and ran to the stables, she could grab her horse and never need to return to that horrible place. However, if she this time, she could help him get through that suffering. It didn't matter who he really was. At least this morning. Far from there, at Mujin's residence, he seemed to have some kind of insomnia. The man could only think about how everything seemed fated to happen, even if the real Han never returned. Days before, Mujin had heard men talking about how he wasn't cut out to be a merchant like his father. On the other side of the wall, they said the young master needed more responsibilities, but maybe that was too much for him. The boy hadn't even found a wife. One of them confided that Lady Min refused all marriage proposals so as not to favor him. He himself had heard her say she didn't want a good girl from a respectable house to marry a useless young man like him. And on the other hand, a girl from a less privileged class would never be worthy of the Min house and would bring dishonor to the whole family. Mujin couldn't stand hearing so much nonsense anymore. To them, sending the young master to Tsushima was her final strategy to get rid of him. He turned over in bed, annoyed that the men in the courtyard were actually telling the truth. The man felt something sharp in his pillow. Oh no, what could that be? Mujin got even more annoyed, thinking they had so little respect for him that even his laundry was being handled carelessly. Then he noticed something strange. From the pillowcase came a reddish smell. He got quite scared and felt a chill. Mujin grabbed the paper and, oh no, it was an ill-omened talisman. A little while later, he got on his horse and left in the middle of the night. He had a destination in mind. Mujin was determined to get what he wanted. In the distance, he spotted the city shaman's house. He walked briskly toward the shack. In a quick impulse, he drew his sword, ready for anything. Then Mujin entered the old woman's house, and there she was, sitting in the dark. It was as if she'd been awake waiting for him. The blade shone with the moon's reflection, close to her neck. Mujin said she was plotting with a con artist to deceive his parents. He asked how much she had received for that atrocity. The old woman just told him to look around. Did she look like she'd received any kind of fortune? He said if she wasn't plotting anything, why was she so close to Lady Min? The shaman explained the woman before her had had a very deep connection with Lady Min, and she was just fulfilling her role. Spiritual bonds were passed down from generation to generation. Mujin asked if that was the best excuse she had. Suddenly, Bumia arrived. The girl had come there to deliver a message directly from Lady Min. Oh no, she'd arrived at the worst possible time. Bumia ended up falling to the floor, dropping all her potatoes. Mujin said it was very suspicious for the shaman to receive visitors in the middle of the night. There must be something more going on. He pointed his sword at the girl. The young master demanded she tell him the truth. How was that shaman connected to Lady Min? Bumia, trembling with fear, explained the shaman had never said that man was really Han. She had only said they would soon receive a very important guest. Mujin asked who she was talking about. What had she received? Bumia replied, it was a talisman from the head monk of Gumgaiza temple. The man asked if she was talking about the cursed amulet that had been in his pillow. Mujin was furious. He had no idea how many people could be plotting against his life. He raised his sword but was interrupted by the shaman. The old woman simply said he shouldn't worry about the girl, since she wouldn't last much longer. Oh my god! Mujin stopped the strike mid-air. Bumia was also caught off guard by the shaman's words. She asked what she meant by that. The shaman replied that the amulet actually served to ward off evil spirits. He couldn't understand. How was that possible? But the shaman really was telling the truth. So it wasn't a curse? The old woman said it wasn't quite like that. She revealed with scorn that to Lady Min, the young man was the evil spirit haunting her family. Mujin felt devastated upon discovering that. He was left quite shaken. Mujin arrived home feeling quite lost. He remembered the day he received his name, some random word that had no meaning or importance. For the young man, life was a constant fate. He had to live quietly, go unnoticed as if he were no one. Even if he reached the depths of fear, he should keep living silently. Then he began to dig. The shaman had said that to get rid of the talisman, he needed to get rid of the cursed doll buried on the property. With trembling hands, he grabbed the item and pulled out the nail that pierced the doll. Mujin was determined to change his fate. Far from there, Han said it was time for them to rest a bit. The horses needed to graze a little. He threw himself onto the grass to sleep a bit. Our protagonist seemed a bit apprehensive. What could Jade be thinking? Wow, he passed out fast. Han must be really tired. Jade assumed that, because of the difficult night, he must have slept very little. She needed to get organized soon. They would arrive in Hanyang in just 2 days. Would that be a good opportunity to make a run for the border? Jade wasn't sure she could trust that man. She didn't even know if he was really her brother. She sighed, lost in her thoughts. Even after many years, she could hear her little brother's voice calling to her. He would ask, "Where are you, Jade?" and call for his sister several times. Jade would never give up finding him, no matter the cost. Somehow, she still had hope of finding her brother. Suddenly, the man began reciting the mountain song. Before she could get on the horse, she heard him reciting the poem from their childhood. He woke up and asked if she was going to abandon him there. It didn't seem like Jade had cried in the silver grass field days before. Han then revealed he had been keeping something for her, for old time's sake. Oh, a hazelnut, that was a very special memory for Jade with her brother. The mere memory made her cry. Could it be? She was certain he was Han. Finally, the doubts had ended. Amid tears, Jade asked if he had any idea how much she had prayed for him to come home. But now they were together. Han noticed she cried when she felt guilty. He said she could shed all the tears she couldn't before, since she'd be safe with him. However, deep down he knew he was deceiving the girl. Oh no. Of all the books in the Min house, all he needed to grab were old diaries. And that was all it took to soften Jeedbee's heart. Han had always thought it would be a triumphant moment, but he realized no one had ever run into his arms the way she did. When she found out the truth, she would hate him more than ever. If that ending was inevitable, then he wanted to enjoy those days of happiness as much as possible. It was the least he could do. His life had always been troubled, and ruin always seemed like a near future. Because of that, he wished to stay with her, at least for those few moments. Jae noticed the place they were in was very beautiful. According to him, there were several places like that near Gaesung. She had never seen flowers like those. Han explained. They bloomed all year round, but people preferred camellias. And so Jae promised she'd pay more attention to the Habayth flowers from then on. The protagonist asked him to braid flowers into her hair. Surely his fingers would remember if he tried. And so he did. So lovely. The two of them were getting along well now. Jade was very happy. She was certain his fingers would remember the movements. But Han wasn't so sure anymore. The girl suggested they go to the mountains when the camellias bloom in spring. She asked if he knew where they could see the autumn camellias. Han replied yes. He didn't seem certain he'd be able to take her. But Jae wished very much to go with him, and asked Han to promise to take her. The man replied that promises were for children, but the protagonist insisted she really wanted to go see them. Jae, with a lovely smile, said it was a promise. Han, embarrassed by his secret, reluctantly accepted the promise. His heart was beating heavily in his chest, and so the two made a pinky promise. Sometime later, Han and Jade returned to the palace. Lady Min, as always, was very happy to see her son again. She said he must be very tired from the long trip and that he should accompany her to rest. From a distance, they watched each other in silence. He showed her an enigmatic smile, but Jade returned it with a sweet smile. She remembered the night before. Han had gone to her room and they'd talked non-stop until he fell asleep. Jade thought he slept just like a little boy. He even slept with his arms raised like when they were children. She noticed a detail. Their hands both had many calluses. He'd probably been forced into a lot of hard labor while working for the Haiwolru family. But there was something different. Swordsmen had scars in a specific area of the hand, and men who used smaller daggers in another area. She remembered the hands of Lady Min's bodyguard. Han had scars only between his fingers. Maybe he used smaller daggers. How could someone like him use something so discreet? Could the reason be connected to the scars on his heels? Who could have confined him for all that time? Suddenly, Han rolled on top of her, hugging the girl. She knew they were only siblings, but the hug of a man like him. Wow. Our protagonist was blushing because of the closeness to him. It was good to see Han sleeping in peace. She felt relieved to see him so calm. Back in the present, Grandma Yuboom called for Jade several times. The lady asked why Jade was so distracted. She didn't want to stay out there. Then the girl decided to ask a question. Yuboom asked what she'd like to know. Jade asked if the palace was different, cleaner. Yuboom said she cleaned every day, but the cobwebs remained. The protagonist also noticed the roof tile shards still remained in the courtyard. So why did it now feel comforting to come home, even though she had made several vows to leave that place? But the real change was inside her. Throughout that whole adventure, she had changed. The girl no longer needed to stay up late, fighting with shadows of the past. Her home was no longer a prison. Then someone arrived, calling for the protagonist. It was Mujin. He was so happy. The sound of his voice was comforting. Jade gave a lovely smile upon seeing her adoptive brother again. Time seemed to have stopped between the two of them. Back in the girls' chambers, everything seemed to have stayed in the same place. She served tea and cookies. Mujin noticed that when Jade left for Hamwol, she had been pale as a ghost, but now she was more fleshed and healthy. The man asked if she was listening. He warned that Yisu would soon arrive and would prove once and for all that man was a con artist. But Jade replied that was the real Han. Mujin wasn't expecting that. What would happen to his plans now? He asked her what had happened on that trip. Had that con artist convinced her through threats? The man said that couldn't be true. Jade shook her head and explained Han had gone through a lot of hardship and that she had been foolish not to recognize him right away. She said she understood why Mujin was so angry. After all, she had found out their father would send him to Tsushima Island. Mujin was disappointed about that. Jade grew sad, thinking that with Han's return, the young man would have less and less place in the family business. She didn't want them to turn their backs on Mujin, as if he were a useless pawn. If things continued that way, it would be safer for him to take his business outside the Min house. And as for her, Jiyu would like to make up for all the time lost with Han. She hoped her brother wouldn't feel discouraged. The protagonist explained her father needed to convince Lady Min, so it would certainly be something temporary, almost like a business trip. To Mujin, Jade seemed like a stranger. In 10 years, he had never seen her that way before. She seemed so calm. Could that bastard be filling her head with ideas? Mujin couldn't bear thinking that 10 years between them had meant nothing, and that they were just adoptive siblings. He asked her to reconsider her feelings about Han, but before he could continue, Cheolmin appeared with urgent news. Mujin asked what he was talking about. The man revealed there had been an accident in Moksagul Valley. Oh no, what could have happened? Mujin galloped swiftly. The news was that someone important to him had been punished for stealing a sack of rice, but not even the doctor could help him. Someone told him it was better to forget the past. Mujin needed to get there as fast as possible. That had been his last request. He was very worried and made the horse go faster. Finally, he arrived at the property, his old home. He approached the house, his footsteps quiet as always. But upon opening the door, he had an unpleasant surprise. His father was on the floor, covered in red stains. He was so weak he didn't even recognize his son until he realized who had arrived. The father asked if it was really him, calling him by his old name. Mujin remembered that his father had received a great fortune for him. The weak man could barely tell if he was going crazy or not. He crawled toward his son. Mujin asked why his father was living like that, since he had sold his only son for a fortune. He was very sad seeing his father in that state. Anger made him ask his father what he had done with all that money to end up in that condition. In tears, the man begged his son's forgiveness. Mujin reminded his father he was a man of noble birth, who had barely cared when he sent his son away. How could he now be stealing sacks of rice? He grabbed his father by the clothes. Mujin asked repeatedly why his father had sold him, but the man could only cry, begging his son to forgive him. He knew he had done great wrong. Mujin reminded him that he was his only son. He would have preferred helping him gather firewood in the forest and eating only pine nuts and acorns. He would never abandon his father. And so father and son embraced. Forgiveness is such a beautiful virtue, isn't it? Ah, finally a peaceful night. The Minhouse palaces were quiet. Han was up to something in the garden. He seemed to be asking a little creature to stop moving. Then someone asked who he was talking to. Grandma Yuboom was impressed, since Han had been very afraid of turtles as a child. He didn't seem too convinced. Haha! Han decided to let it go, since he had already finished what he wanted to do. Then he saw her offer some food. Yuboom offered him a roasted rice cake, just like he liked when he was little. He thanked her since it was nice and warm and she'd had to prepare those cakes in the oven for him. Han asked the lady if Jade had gotten engaged yet. Yuboom explained she refused every proposal and didn't even have friends. She had sworn never to marry. The man asked if their parents would accept her staying single forever. The lady didn't know what to think of that. Every time the two talked, Jade would ask if her suitors had given up on her yet. Han didn't understand why that was. Yuboom said that if she married someone who passed away shortly after, she could live the rest of her days alone. He asked if the person she married had to be wealthy. The lady replied that would be the only condition Lady Min would allow. Yuboom confessed she always felt sad seeing Lady Min try to marry Jade off to suitors from distant places, just to send her far away. Far from there, our protagonist admired the night sky. The girl regretted having been cruel to Han when he arrived, and regretted saying cruel things to him, despite him having been quite patient with her. She wanted to think of ways to make up for that from then on, but she couldn't stop thinking about the little mint-scented pouch hidden in her clothes. It was made of delicate embroidered fabric, made with love by someone special. Han was so attached to it that he even slept with the little item. Jade had barely gotten her brother back, but all she wanted to know was who had given him that pouch and what it meant to him. The night continued. In the garden, the crickets sang their symphony. Our girl seemed to feel lonely until she heard an unexpected sound. Something was stepping on the roof tile shards. Oh, it was a turtle. She asked why the little animal had a candle on its back, until she understood. Haha, it could only be him. How cute. Jiyu knew very well the only person who could have done that. She bent down for a moment. That was the work of her generous brother. Thanks to him, our girl no longer felt afraid of the dark, since he had chased away all the shadows that had haunted her. Now she no longer cared what woman might have given him that pouch, since now she was at peace with Han. Nothing in the world compared to the happiness of falling asleep beside him, under the same roof, and the affection. The affection she felt for him. Nothing in the world could shake it. Remembering his face, her heart even raced a little. What could that feeling be? Not even our girl was able to understand it. And that's it for today, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the story. Han and Jade finally rebuilt this sibling relationship, but we know this piece is only on the surface, right? That secret of Han's could explode at any moment, and I'm already preparing myself emotionally for the next chapters. And Mujin, huh? Are you rooting for him, or do you think he'll end up getting hurt in all of this? Who here already suspected something was off about Han from the beginning? Comment below at what point you noticed, and what do you think so far? And if you want more, don't forget to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss any new videos I post. The name of this work is Dear Han Run, and our recap went up to chapter 32. Kisses, and until next time.